But okay, I'm alive. Okay, shut this up. Oh, I probably should change the we might actually be reading the changes that the Discord made, or whatever pledges they made. Let's see. I'll pull it up here. Oh, gorgeous. Okay. I want to add this to the title. Let's see. Oh, YouTube. It's too long for YouTube. Okay. Let's do it. B, C, B. Okay. Now we're good. Oh, I'm not streaming Witcher. I'm in politics. Done. And let's see. Same here for D-Live. I guess we'll put streets. Streets of Rage 4. Save it. Okay. Actually, the screen for D-Live is pretty good for, pretty clean for moderation. Why didn't you just use that? Let me see. Okay, I can use that. God. Profile. Jesus, this app is super bad on tablets. What about me? Where am I? Profile. This is bullshit. I guess you can't really go live from the D-Live application. That's why they're not doing anything with that. Well, let's switch back to the Twitch one. Okay. I think I'm gonna speed up Bret a little bit because wait, that's not what I want. This is what I want. I'm not even good this fast because it's 3 hours. 3 hours should be around 2, a little bit more than 2 on this kind of speed. So let's put a CC on. Oh.
We gotta do something. We need to defund the police. And then everyone's like, good job. Great. If anybody sounded the alarm that all this madness was gonna come to fruition in the real world, it's you, sir. You were the guy. Like, you were the one who was saying this is what's happening in Evergreen. And if you don't know, go Google it. Bret Weinstein, Evergreen. And now it spills out to the real world.
Just like I said it was gonna.
You did.
I did. I said it in several different places, and pretty clearly, you know, it could have been a tiny bit more precision, but it was highly accurate.
You were highly accurate and often maligned and mocked.
Yep.
People didn't think it was a big deal. They think you're much ado about nothing. You're making a big deal about some kids that are voicing their opinions on things, but what you recognized
Check.
there was an authoritarian
Yeah,
aspect
might
of it,
be
a
a
forced
little too
compliance
loud.
aspect of it that's very dangerous.
Yeah, it's all about force, and you know, I've started to get calls in the last week or two. The people who mocked me and others, including you, for making too much of what appears to be college kids going wild on college campuses. Some of them have started to call and say, "I got it wrong. What do we do now?" And actually,
You're
I
fucked.
appreciate those calls and those contacts, because really that is the question.
Yeah, what
Somebody's
do we
gotta-
do now to pull it back?
Yeah.
How do you get the genie back in the bottle? Or as Douglas Murray says, how do you put the brakes on this thing?
How do you put the brakes on this thing, indeed? Well, I have to tell you, I'm not optimistic. I think that this is actually, the people who are catching up to the fact that Evergreen has now spilled over into the world have not caught up to the fact that this is unstoppable at this point with the current configuration. The absence of leadership is going to prevent us from doing what we should do, and that means that the next set of predictions are far more dire.
What is your next prediction?
Well, I would say we are headed for a collision course with history. I mean, we're really staring at many scenarios that end in some kind of civil war. And while I do think it is still possible...
Ooh, Stitch is not gonna like that one.
The force that gets
Civil War?
it's really
Brett!
What do you think?
What are you
these
what are
kids
you
want?
saying?
Not just kids. What do you think the people that are facilitating chaos? What do you think they want?
Well, I think there's some danger in casting them as one thing, because I think we have several things fused together, and that until you understand what has joined forces with what, you're not gonna. There's no way to answer the question.
All right, let's break it down.
Okay, so one thing that we're seeing is, and we really have to take this back a number of years to understand why it happened, but we are seeing Occupy 2.0. Now, I participated in Occupy. Originally, Occupy...
Whoa, it's your fault, Brett.
program, and to
You
be
did
fair,
this.
The American public was...
But Occupy was only
created the financial collapse worked, and that was a legitimate...
a little bit of the internet bubbling into the surface.
Occupy then morphed into...
But that's... Occupy was internet 12 years ago.
It became absurd. So when I say this is Occupy 2.0, this is the anarchist version of Occupy that has now reemerged,
Occupy was anarchist.
which I've said lots of different places. If Black Lives Matter just simply meant what those words imply, I'd be on board.
The main premise of your Occupy was the 1%.
That in the last...
The
What
1%.
else do you think it means?
Well,
That was the main premise of Occupy. If that's not
which is
a grievance that's
ever... it's not like we haven't seen...
aired by
Don't you think that's just a
anarcho-communists
response to the obvious police brutality
predominantly,
we saw in
then I don't know what
Minneapolis?
is.
We gotta do something. We need to defund the police, and then everyone's like, "Good job, great first step." At least.
Well, no. It's a dishonest presentation, and I'm concerned that there, as I've also said in many places, the proposals that are coming out of this movement are quite foolish. The strategy is incredibly smart. And so that is confusing to people, because when you hear folks in the street demanding that we abolish the police, you think, well, okay, that's never going to happen. If it even started to happen, it would be so complex to make it happen that it can't possibly be. They just need to blow off some steam. Nope, that's not right. The fact is, the police in some places can effectively be halted in their tracks. And really, if there's one most important lesson out of the whole Evergreen fiasco, it's that the police can be withdrawn from a situation and chaos takes a matter of hours to emerge, which we're also seeing in Seattle.
Yeah. The defunding of the police, which is happening in Minneapolis, what are they doing in replacement of the police?
Well, I don't know, and I will say that the thing that is trotted out as the example that tells us that defund the police, which doesn't really mean defund the police, it means abolish the police. We are told that that's safe on the basis of something like the Camden example.
It can't be just they sort of broke the police down, but then built up a new version of the police, right?
Yeah, they shifted it to a different jurisdiction. And look, I'm not arguing that we don't need massive police reform, and frankly, I'd be up for a discussion of a total rethink of the way we do policing. But the idea that you could withdraw the police first is absolutely insane.
Mark Lamont Hill had a very good point about the guy who was killed. What is the gentleman's name that was killed in the drive-through fast food place? Richard, is that his name? Who was just drunk and compliant and peaceful until they were telling him they were going to arrest him. Even said, "Get me an Uber." And what his point was a very good point. Why were the police even called for that? This is a non-violent person who just happened to be drunk. Was he doing something he shouldn't have been doing? Yes. But obviously compliant, polite, speaking just like very reasonably until it escalated into this tussle. And then he lost his life. If they had just had some sort of a program where they could, we're going to park your car, sir, or we'll have someone drive your car to your house, we're going to call you an Uber, or we're going to take you home, and we're going to just write you a ticket and work this out in court. You're not going to go to jail. You don't have to be arrested. You don't have to be handcuffed. You don't have to be treated like a monster. You fucked up and made a mistake, but you're not a bad person. You're not a person who's trying to hurt people. The police should be there for robbers, murderers, rapists. That's what we need the police for. And this is none of those things. This is just a guy who fucked up and he got drunk. And
I don't know.
As they were speaking to him,
I don't know, Joe.
real clear. Not a bad guy.
There's a bunch of other stuff
just talking to him very reasonably.
that we need police for. That's not
Look, I am
the
not
most
a fan
violent
of
crimes.
aggressive style of policing.
No.
I'm not a fan of the militarization of the police. I've actually, I mean, I've had been in the police. I've been hit
You
twice. So
will
it's
want
happened.
police to
one of these is a
be
long story that goes back to
patrolling to see if there's anything,
and the other one
to catch
is,
those
was
criminals
basically
without
very
even
20.
receiving a phone call
And frankly, it happened without my awareness.
about a murder. Stop it before it happens, slightly before it happens, as it happens.
Protesting, the cops,
Stop.
hit me with a baton.
And
Now,
that's
so,
gonna
anyway, I'm not a fan of
already
this stuff. I'm not
Right.
defending it, but that's not what
put
this movement is really
police-
about. And even if it is, to the extent that it is what this
Ah.
movement is really about, it doesn't deal with the root cause. We're dealing with a symptom, and it's not a symptom that you can treat in isolation.
Well, I had Jocko Willink on the podcast on Monday, and he had a great point. Obviously, Jocko was Navy SEAL commander and worked with the Navy SEALs to create programs for training. And what he said is that these cops have the minimal amount of training. It's the tiniest amount of training, and then they send them on the street. He goes, 20% of their time should be spent training. 20%. It should be de-escalation drills, simulation drills, educating them on how to communicate with people in various situations, educating them as how if one cop is in a confrontation with someone, the next cop should step in and say, let's just calm down, Mike. Let's go deal with this over there, and I'm going to handle this. And sir, let's take this from scratch. Like let's work this out. And that having higher qualified police officers, better trained police officers, better compensated police forces, so they're not taxed out, is really the answer to all this. And these people are, nobody wants to be a cop right now. So who's doing this, right? Who's the new generation from now out? When people sign up to be a police officer, who's going to do this? You have a few that are going to answer that call because they feel like they have a duty. But you're going to have a lot of people that just they can't get other jobs, and so they choose that. And maybe they're not the cream of the crop. And that's very bad for people with guns to tell other people what to do.
I hear two things in what you're saying, and one of them I fully agree with. The implication of what you just said is that less funding isn't the solution. If anything, more funding is so that we get better qualified people.
Better
and
training.
We train them, right? We get people who are better suited to the job in the first place, and then we train them better so they know what to do. And I agree with that. The part that I'm worried about is that I think I hear you grasping at straws, and frankly, they're familiar. I hear everybody grasping at straws here. And what I think is not getting said is that brutal policing is a feature, not a bug. Right? This is
Yes!
that is about something else.
Yes!
To the extent
Bret!
that I think
Yeah,
that
I
people
fucking
recognize
love you.
there is something absolutely organic
I
about
fucking love this guy.
that has caused people to spill into the streets in large numbers. That anger is the result of a process that does not begin with policing. It begins with economic phenomena and political.
And being human too,
One of the
right?
things that spooks me is this movement.
Yeah, but frustration. What was the guy? What is the
things that it can see? It's lashing out at anecdotes. But
Wendy's guy
the only proper solution that
name?
actually saves the republic.
I was thinking, like,
addresses the core problem.
Okay,
Economic
you're probably
despair,
the
communities
kind
are
of
filled with crime
husband
and
who's
violence,
left
and
who
people
who has
communities with
kids,
people
but
and
you
all the models that they operate under.
but your life is on a downward
Is
spiral.
around them, which is
You
also crime, and they don't have this sense that there's a very
you know you're gonna lose custody of your children if you get another arrest,
This actually goes back
and you just are and you are being stopped. Is the problem policing really,
to the Party,
or the fact that you
Republican Party
are a guy and
defending the interests of common people as its reason for gain.
and you
That created a problem. So during the Clinton administration,
Okay,
we
this is
saw
great.
the end to dependent children. We saw NAFTA. We saw basically an abandonment of the core raison d'etre for the Democratic Party. Now, the Republican Party at that point was the
No!
party of business. But that doesn't really mean the party of business. What the Republican Party was the party of well-established large businesses, which frequently their interest that it was preventing small businesses from rising up that would threaten its constituents. Now, the Democrats took up this model. They went into influence peddling as well during the Clinton administration, and they became the party of other businesses. So now you have two parties that are basically dealing with competing business interests, vying for power. But what that does is it excludes the interests of regular folks. And so regular folks have been getting the shaft ever since. Nobody is representing their interests. They're getting wise to it, and they're feeling the effects on the street. They are feeling the system is rigged. It's rigged against them. It's not even evenly rigged against them. So, in black communities, there's a perception it's specifically rigged against us. And you know what? It is. But the way it is very subtle, right? It's not a matter of racism being ubiquitous, inside every white head. It's not like that. This has very little to do with modern racism. But what it has to do with is a property of our system. So, there's a cybernetic principle. The purpose of a system is what it does. It means that don't listen to what somebody says that the system's for. Look at what it accomplishes. That's what it's for. And our system basically has two things that it accomplishes. It basically keeps real change from happening. And the reason it keeps real change from happening is because people who are winning in the present system will continue to win.
This is a little stupid.
Kind of organic.
And why would you want real change? What is that? What does that even mean? Isn't that just one more dog whistle?
Distribution into the future. And what that means is racism that has almost died out is still alive and well in a sense, because all you have to do is take people who are born
real change.
What?
Why is change a value, huh?
No opportunity shows up, then people who were oppressed are now going to continue to be oppressed. And so it feels personal, but it isn't. It's just reproducing an existence that's happening.
And a lot of that emanates from these communities that have been disenfranchised and economically distraught from slavery. Like literally from that, where we're dealing with the echoes of slavery, and it doesn't get addressed. And when people
do we?
Reparations, people roll their eyes.
200 years, huh? Well, not 200.
But the results of that are
Not
still alive
200.
today in the South. They're still alive today in many communities that were redlined as recently as the 1960s.
That's exactly right. And so we basically have set ourselves up for a confused response, because there's a subtlety. The fact that ancient racism, people who are dead, their racism still haunts us today through mechanisms of the reproduction of patterns of distribution. And mind you, when people hear distribution, they freak out because they think you're talking about wealth. I'm not talking about wealth. We can talk about why I wouldn't bother. But what we're talking about is opportunity. Opportunity has been hoarded, has been concentrated in some zip codes and almost totally excluded from other zip codes. And so you're right. The patterns of slavery moved into Jim Crow, and now they've moved into a phase where they are very subtly infused into our system. And so it's causing people to have the sense that there is an enemy and it is out to get me, when it's not exactly an enemy that's out to get you. It's a pattern. Right? It's a pattern that definitely needs to be addressed. And so the natural place would have been the Democratic Party.
Okay.
But the Democratic Party, because it has taken up with big business, is not going to do it, even though it would be a winning political strategy. The Democratic Party is more interested in serving the economic interests of its actual constituents than it is serving the interests of its nominal constituents. And so, why are you seeing something that looks like a communist revolution beginning in the States with a natural leader? Because the people are feeling excluded from their share, and they are being excluded. But this revolution that is beginning in our streets is no more coherent or desirable than, the Maoism. It's going to be brutal in the Maoist way, or possibly the way that it unfolded in the French Revolution, or maybe it'll be some unique version and get its own name. But if we want the Republic to survive, we're going to have to prevent this from happening. And because it's a leaderless movement, who do we even talk? Who do we reason?
Yeah, that's what's fascinating about it, right? Because it's emerging not just in America, but it's also in England. It's in all parts of the world. People are protesting.
Right. So something else is going on. If it's also in like countries that are predominantly white, then there's something else going on. Come on, stop it. This is just crazy leftist. It's not. It's not racist. Oh my God!
They do feel disenfranchised by the system. So I watch them. I've seen so many videos of these people out there screaming and cheering and chanting, and they feel like they're a part of something, right? And they are, right? But what is that thing that they're a part of? Like, what's the end goal? That doesn't seem to have been really clear. Like, there's kids out in they were out in Woodland Hills out there chanting "No justice, no peace," and I'm like, okay, what justice are you talking about? Are you talking about George Floyd? Well,
social justice.
That guy's gonna go to jail for the rest of his life, and I don't know if that's justice or not. That police department's been disbanded. I don't know if that's justice or not. But what is justice and what is peace? It's just a slogan, but they feel good saying it. No justice, no peace.
That's true.
But I don't know what you're saying. But you feel.
I mean, social
justice.
justice.
I think if you pulled one of those kids aside and said, "What's your message? And what are you trying to do?" I think a lot of them would have nothing to say. And that's very concerning to me. I'm very concerned about that because it seems like they're very enthusiastic and passionate about an invisible enemy, an enemy that they can't put on a scale. They can't tangibly describe it in a way that I understand it completely. It just seems like the structure of things they feel like is unjust.
It is unfortunately a zombified collective fighting a boogeyman that they have invented. Which again doesn't mean that their frustration is not about something very real that does require a solution. But to the extent these people have de-individuated and they've become a true mob and they are pushing policies that make no sense and endanger us all. I mean, there is no neighborhood in the U.S. that is going to be safer for the absence of the police. And it really doesn't even matter how corrupt the police are. The absence of the police is going to create a power vacuum and get forward with it. And we're already seeing in New Hampshire and Seattle, as we already saw at Evergreen. Yeah. So it's not a coherent proposal. But I have a concern that the reason that this is leaderless is that something that I think is unrelated.
This is a pretty good.
It's unintentional, but there's something about the way that influence happens in this era that has taken all of the would-be leaders and has trapped them in the gig economy. And so we have a lot of people who would be in an excellent position to steer this justifiable anger at an enemy that is actually worth attacking, to curb the violence and to make this a moment of useful and necessary change. I would argue overdue change. But those people are, instead of being leaders, what they are is influencers. And influencers don't have the kind of power necessary to shape a movement, and they don't have the position to negotiate on its behalf, and this is very dangerous.
Where do you think this escalates to? Do you have a a map in your mind of where the territory is?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there are several ways it could go, but unfortunately, the dynamics look almost unresolvable if somebody does not speak for the movement. And with it being unresolvable, you've got a conflict between rural people and urban people. You have a conflict between blacks and those who are self-declared allies. And ally doesn't really mean ally. Foot soldiers on behalf of this movement and people who won't go along with it. And what I'm trying to raise people's awareness of right now is that there's something in us, being raised in the U.S., there's something in us that thinks that the great leap forward in China cannot happen, that what happened in Cambodia cannot happen, that Nazi Germany cannot happen.
Right.
And, the Soviet Union couldn't happen. I don't know what characteristic it is that people think makes it impossible. I don't think it's impossible. I think if there is a characteristic that makes it unlikely, it is the structure. It is the Constitution, which I would argue is showing its age, but nonetheless the values that America aspires to, the reason that the world does pay attention to us, and still, even with all of our brokenness, allows us to lead it, that reason is that the values that were described were honorable, even if we didn't meet them. But what we aspired to be was great, and I resent Trump's Make America Great Again because there are populations for whom it has simply never been great, right? So I think that last A in MAGA is just a finger in the eye for people, and it was designed to be. But the structure, what it aspires to be is great, and heading in the direction in which it could be great for everybody is obviously the right thing to do. But what we're now doing, and the thing that troubles me most about this movement, is that if you listen to it closely, and I have listened to it very closely, it is explicitly about disassembling the very things that make the West marvelous. Right? It is anti-science. Right? It does not want policy based on science. In fact,
How so?
Well, I mean, we saw last week, presumably, that
Fuck!
Nature, Journal Nature, Science Magazine, Caltech, about all of these just absolutely top-level scientific institutions to broadcast the hashtag #ShutDownSTEM.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Ah, yes.
Oh, well, and this is another thing. We're losing our minds because, to me, the idea that you would be unaware of this...
Come on!
Because
There's
it was
too much going on.
It was so thoroughly all over my feed, but I'm discovering this. There's stuff absent from my feed, too, that I should know about, and I'm finding the same thing.
But here's the thing.
Yep.
I don't read my feed.
Well, you don't read your Twitter feed, but you're plugged into enough people. You have conversations in the room.
Things have to be like almost nuclear before I'm paying attention to them these days, just for my own personal sanity.
Yeah.
I've stepped away from almost all social media other than posting.
Yeah, it's actually, say something perfectly weird. I don't really aspire to great wealth. I never have, but there is part of me that wants to be wealthy enough that I can afford to ignore my feeds, right?
Yeah.
I can't now. I have to plug in. But anyway, the thing that's really concerning, and I want this podcast to be all about concern.
Here it is. Thousands of scientists go on strike to protest systemic racism in STEM. More than 5,000 scientists in 2 prominent scientific journals shut down operations and pledged to use the day to address racial inequalities.
Fuck!
The strike follows 2 weeks of demonstrations spurred by the police killing of George Floyd, a black man who died after a rifle assassination. People on social media are spreading word about the strike with the hashtag #ShutDownAcademia, #ShutDownSTEM, and Strike for Black Lives. Shut down academia is terrifying. Shut down STEM is equally terrifying. But I mean, like, what takes place? What do you expect?
Well,
if you shut down academia, like, what do they say when they say systemic racism in STEM? What does it mean? It's representation in terms of like what are they saying?
So this is so sad because
it's really hard to.
If you really wanted to raise black people out of the quagmire, the economic quagmire they find themselves in, if you wanted to do it en masse, you would arm them with the most powerful tools, right? The most powerful tool, and the tool that is best positioned to address biases, especially subtle biases, is science. That's what the scientific method does. That's one reason for existing. It takes that which you think and allows you to see why it is wrong, right? It takes your biases and forces you to see what's wrong with them. That's what science is for. Now, the reason that this movement is attacking STEM has to do with the connection of this movement to critical theory. And critical theory didn't come from the sciences. The word theory is basically pilfering. Right? It's being used in the most ironic way. Critical theory is a narrative that's now becoming a religious one, and it is anti-STEM on the basis that it claims that STEM itself, science itself, is racist inherently.
What do they mean when they say critical theory?
Yeah.
What does that encompass?
Well, my understanding is that critical theory was born as an honorable investigation of biases that exist inside of our court system, racial biases, and that it has now morphed into something that its originators don't recognize and don't respect. That it has become basically had George Peterson, many people, and what he talks about with respect to these are cultural Marxists, and they are wielding this postmodern doctrine. What he's talking about is critical theory. Right? Critical theory is basically a Trojan horse that exists in academic departments that are dedicated to its study. And what it does is it uninvents progress in other fields. And that's a very uninteresting process when it's hiding away in some corner of your university where you don't have to listen to it. But what has happened is it has now reached enough people that it has spilled out into public. And the nonsense that you hear about shutting down academia, shutting down STEM, abolishing the police, all of this is standard fare in those phony departments.
When you say uninvents progress,
now,
what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, that we have a system, and I'm as upset about what doesn't work about it as anybody, but we have a system that accomplishes a great deal. And this style of thought, all of these departments that end in theory, that don't actually function by normal rules of logic or the scientific process, these things are an attack. They're like an autoimmune disease of the academic culture. And by and large, the scientific part of it keeps its head down and stays away from people who believe in this stuff and it tries to do its work. But what has happened is that the dynamics, the demographics have changed such that these departments, which weren't taken seriously by the scientists, are now dictating terms of the scientists, which couldn't possibly be more dangerous, because to the extent that the argument more or less is that the sciences are unfairly biased in favor of those who are currently successful, and that bias is actually preventing people who are not succeeding under current conditions from getting there, and therefore we need to hobble these disciplines to level the playing field. Well, imagine that America surrendered its advantage in the sciences in order to, even if you could level the playing field inside of the U.S. by doing that, which you can't, but even if you could, this would so hobble us in the world that it would be an insane policy to pursue.
Is there any debate going on about this? Clearly what they're saying is, if you're looking at the vast majority of the scientists, they represent, what is it? European Jews are a lot of them. There's a lot of various people of European ancestry, Asian folks, less African Americans, less Africans. So they're saying that because of this is clear evidence of racism.
Yeah, which is total nonsense.
What is it evidence of?
It's evidence of a number of things. And, I find myself in two places on one of these. On the one hand, sometimes I'm sitting here on your podcast defending academia. On any normal day, I would be telling you academia was so incredibly broken and science has been so incredibly corrupted by its concepts of the market that we have to fix these things because that is in and of itself a threat to the West. Here, I find myself saying, wait a second, these people are actually telling you what they think. They think science is the enemy. And instead of democratizing the tools of science and giving them to the people who need it the most, they want to end science. So the problems are separate. Unfortunately, they're not tremendously interesting. They're sort of dry inside baseball stuff.
But I think we have to cover them, though, just to sort of...
Come on, this is an S rank.
Racism argument when it comes to representation.
Sure. So first of all, I have to say, academia
Please,
is
S.
tremendously liberal. And that, I mean that in both senses. Let's take the honor.
Yes!
Right? Inside of a university, there is every desire to bring people who do not look like the old white guys that have done so much of the past work in science. There is a desire to broaden. So it is not true that privately scientists are harboring racist views and talking about them and then, behaving themselves when they're around people who are of a different color. It's not like that, okay? There's a desire to have those people show up and get the job because, for one thing, it takes the pressure off. To the extent that departments don't look like the demographics of the country in which these departments are housed, that raises questions. And so there's a desire to bring in anybody who makes it clear that that's not going on. However, let's say that you were black and you grew up in a neighborhood where the odds were stacked against you, and you made it. Let's say that you had people who said wise things to you, and they got you to focus on the right stuff, and you managed to dodge the stuff that captures so many, and you made it, right? Let's say you got into Harvard, you got a really good quality degree in a proper science. Well, what are you going to do with it? You're going to go into academia? That would be insane, because I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know what fraction of people who get PhDs actually get the job that they've trained for, but it's tiny.
Is it really?
I'll be like 1 in 20.
Really?
Yeah.
Because there's only so many positions, and every year you're graduating hundreds and hundreds of people with those degrees.
Well, but there's also a very good reason for this. I mean, it's terrible reason, but there's a very easily comprehended reason.
Oh,
So
sorry.
Universities are
No, my...
in large measure by what's called overhead of the grants. So if you get $1 million grant, half or more will go to your university, right? So that's what builds the buildings and fuels the place. So the university has an incentive to get as many people to file grant applications as they can, and they have an incentive to hire people whose grant applications will be large rather than small. So this, for example, is one of the reasons that science has taken up arms against theory, that is to say proper scientific theoreticians like me, and it has instead hired people who run big expensive experiments, because big expensive experiments have big grants, and those big grants bring in money. But if you were a university, and what you wanted was to have people writing big expensive grants who were capable of getting them, then what you would want to do is you would want to free those people from teaching, and you would want to get people who weren't so expensive to do the work of the university. And the way you do that is you bring them on as graduate students, and you pay them an appalling wage. You claim that they are not actually workers, that they are students. And they do most of the teaching, and they do a lot of the work of the university for incredibly low amounts of money. They live under poor conditions, and increasingly they have to come from abroad, where they're in some sense getting a deal that still makes sense. But this means that we overproduce PhDs. We give people degrees instead of money to do the work of the university in order that the people who are capable of getting the grant spend almost full time doing that job. And it's a racket. So
I wasn't aware of that at all. I didn't know how it works.
Yeah, it's a racket. And the person you should talk to, the person who knows the most about this, is actually Eric, my brother. So what he unearthed was actually that there was an explicit conspiracy to game the visa system in order to keep this system running. That in fact, effectively a fake shortage of science students was created to allow the universities to basically flood the market to drive the wages down. But all of these things mean that if you are coming from circumstances that have been challenging and you make it, You don't want to go to graduate school in the sciences because it's a dumb move. You're going to take having gotten your head above water, and then you're going to voluntarily drown. And it doesn't make any sense. You're much better off, even as bad as being a doctor has become. It used to be a great job. Now it's kind of a sucky job, but you're better off doing that because at least it's a job. You'll pay off your loans. You'll make it. And so basically, what we see is that there are lots of reasons that a rational person from certain demographics is less likely to go into the sciences. That's not racism in the sciences. It's again one of these echoes of a past racism or a past indifference that is having huge impacts on the present.
Okay. So these people that want to that think that STEM is racist and they want to dismantle it, what do they propose? Like, what do they propose in replacement of STEM and academia?
So, what they want is so strange and preposterous that it damages my credibility to even say it. I will answer your question,
okay.
But I know that what I'm saying sounds preposterous.
Okay.
And the only reason that I'm so certain of it is that I've talked to them directly, and I watch this happen at every.
You talk to them directly, so you know this is actually what they want.
Well, I can't say they, because
right.
Undoubtedly there's variation, but I can say that to the extent that I've actually had these conversations with people, I was left completely shocked by, there was an example at Evergreen where we were in a faculty meeting, and I said that the proposals that were moving through were a threat to the Enlightenment values that were the basis of the institution. And what I got back was something I had never heard before, which was an attack not only on the Enlightenment, but on the idea of Enlightenment. And I was just so stunned. I was a college professor amongst faculty, and somebody was actually saying out loud that Enlightenment was a problem, and nobody in the room said anything.
What did they mean by Enlightenment is a problem?
Well, so here's what I say to people who ask me about this, students in particular. The Enlightenment was a European project, right? It definitely had a light skin tone, right? It was European men. It was not a Jewish project. But I am not embarrassed about taking the tools of the Enlightenment and wielding. They don't belong to Europe.
Right, they're human.
They're human tools. They were a discovery in Europe, and arguably the discovery in Europe happened because of unfair exclusion of other people. But at some level, who the fuck cares? These
right.
are the most powerful tools ever. And you can't uninvent them. The thing to do is distribute them as broadly as possible. Mm-hmm. But if you're in critical theory, first of all, if you end up in critical theory, any one of these fields, women's studies, queer studies, whatever it is, you have already foregone this option. You don't end up in critical theory if you have the chops to do science. So, in effect, you have people who don't stand to personally benefit from opening those doors wider because they wouldn't go through them, arguing that nobody should go through those doors.
So, let's take a side step here. Critical theory. When you're talking about gender studies or queer studies, why do you think those are not valid avenues for people to pursue?
Well, because the method is non-existent. If you were to do these things properly, you would study them with the tools of STEM, right? But we know that's not what goes on inside of these departments, and we also know that the product doesn't add up from the point of view of science. You can't take the claim, for example, that if a man decides that he is a woman, then he is a woman. That's not a valid claim. It just doesn't stand up. And you can't claim that sex is a spectrum either. That claim doesn't stand up. These are empty. And we could have a discussion about what we are to do in light of the part of gender that is flexible. But we're not having that conversation because we've got an ultimatum on the table. Either you agree sex is a spectrum or you're the enemy.
Right.
So all I would say is just empirically this is what happens. Now I will also say one of the most telling incidents that happened during the Evergreen riots is now finally it's been covered by PBS. I've talked about it on my podcast. A student of Heather and mine, an excellent student, one of the best ones we ever had, is a young woman named Odette. Odette is half black. Her mom is Afro-Caribbean. She was known to be my student and Heather's student during the riots, and she was actually confronted and physically bullied by the rioters who accused her of being a race traitor for studying science. This actually happened. And what I'm telling you
What did they say when they say you're a race traitor for studying science? What specific discipline?
Well, she was studying evolutionary biology with Heather and me, and
they said you were a race traitor for studying evolutionary biology because
science is racist.
Yo.
It's nonsense, and I hear you trying to parse it as if it makes sense, and I think the
I just
point
don't
is,
understand, as a person who spent 3 years barely paying attention in college, I don't know how it got to that. I don't know how that becomes an actual course. I don't know how that gets funded. I don't know how that you can get a degree from that.
Well, so what I've heard of late, and it may be James Lindsay who is the originator of this phraseology, but there's a term, racism of the gaps. And racism of the gaps is a reference to the God of the gaps hypothesis. Anything we can't explain in science is explained by God, which is obviously nonsense. But racism of the gaps says any place where that we see a success differential, the explanation is inherently racism. So if we see an absence of black people in math, obviously the answer is racism.
Do they apply that in areas where black people excel?
No, because this is a self-serving modality.
Like hip-hop?
Right, and so let's go back to Odette for a second. Trying to parse what they're saying as if it has content, logical content, is a mistake. Trying to parse it as a tactical move makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Let's imagine that Odette was not the courageous person that she is and that she had caved. right? Imagine you're cornered. You know, you're alone. You've got a mob that's actually physically confronting you for studying science. If she was not a person of strong character, she might have signed up with them. If she had signed up with them, then now they have a potentially powerful ally, right? A black person, former student of, or at that point, I guess, current student of Heather and mine, who would say, yes, in fact, science is racist, evolutionary biology particularly, so I was in that class, yada, yada, yada.
And people are easily influenced, and that
Many
being
people.
bullied by that would probably cause a lot of people to cave into that and give into that just for conformity, just so that people accept them.
Yes, and so thank goodness that Odette is somebody who is of incredibly strong character, who really got the message of evolutionary biology very deeply, and there's nothing that they could have said or threatened her with that would have caused her to make the move that they wanted her to make. But processing it tactically is important. What they're doing is tactical, and what they did with shut down STEM, tactical. They were proving their power, right? They were able to
Okay, I'm back.
the most important scientific institutions to broadcast a demand to shut down STEM. That's an amazing level of power.
And actual scientists that are in disciplines that are legit, like evolutionary biology, you went along with them?
Well, you know, I contacted Richard Dawkins because I didn't see anything on his feed that suggested, you know, he hadn't made a statement, and I thought it would be powerful for him to do it. I was totally unaware of what was going on. Right, so you have the most important institutions broadcasting this thing. Something about our environment is not calling it to the attention of people who might be in a position to say something. And the whole thing is, it's setting us up. We're in tremendous danger.
And what
Big
do you
doo-doo.
think their motivation is?
Power.
Power.
Well, again,
so
we
what
have to
happens
be
if
careful
they get
about
through? They shut down STEM. Then what do they do? How, you know, are they thinking this far ahead? They're not playing this long game.
Okay. I would tell people who aren't aware of me and what I think and believe that I'm very progressive. I'm very interested in making it fair.
Yeah, that's the problem, Bret.
I know you are. So what I'm about to say sounds like one of those right-wing crazy things.
Oh, no.
What they want, well, imagine the following. Look, first of all, let's talk about reparations for a second.
Okay.
I am not a fan of the idea of reparations. I think it would be a terrible failure. It would be a disaster. But I do believe that something of very substantial magnitude.
CHAZ, give them CHAZ! Give them CHAZ!
Okay.
I think reform in terms of communities. I think spending.
No, they won't be happy with anything. Just give them CHAZ already.
Economic opportunities.
Massive investment
Yeah.
in communities that have been systematically frozen out, and I would
Yes.
put American blacks and American Indians at the top of the list because
Yes.
I believe they have a special claim.
Native Americans are particularly distraught because they've been subjugated to this weird position where they're stuck on these reservations.
So we'll come back to this in a second,
Yeah.
maybe. But I think there's something very
Give
special
Donga reparations.
They're not, it's not exactly alike, but it has to do with their different origin stories. The two
Yes.
populations have both suffered a parallel, I don't know what to call it, an obstacle that makes them unlike
Anyone
other
else?
Americans.
Yes.
So, not in favor of reparations, but I would be in favor of something that did the job that reparations are imagined to do. Okay. What this movement is an attempt to create a slant in every single interaction that does the job of reparations. There's reparations 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in every room, in every institution, in every context. Right? Now, that will be the uninvented America. It is, in some weird sense, a mirror for the America that blacks and Indians have faced. They have faced an America in which everything was slanted against them. It has grown less so. But again, we have the echoes of that deeply slanted America that are broadcast into the present at a high level of intensity. But you cannot do reparations inside of every institution, every hour, every discussion. That is not a plausible plan. Even people who support the idea of monetary reparations as a solution, if they understood the dynamics of trying to infuse it into every interaction, there's no way it could possibly work, and it invalidates all of the most important principles on which America focuses. So we are really talking about uninventing America and substituting a reparations program for it, which
Oh my god.
could possibly be a bigger hazard. Think for a second. You're trying to imagine what the hell I'm talking about. Imagine the courts, right?
Just give them their own country. Give them their own country. They're gonna be happy. They're gonna rule how they want. They're gonna be responsible for their stuff. Just give them their own country. Just call it a black ethno state and be done with it. That's gonna be the reparations.
Doesn't apply to certain things.
And that's it. That's the problem solved. And then maybe they wanna be a state, like be separate or be part of the union or whatever they want. Whatever they want.
They have a skin color that suggests they've had a raw eagle. But you can also make the law apply to people. We can have show trials. Right? I was effectively exposed to the equivalent of a show trial at Evergreen. Right? I was convicted of racism. That happened. That for various reasons, I knew damn well that the charge was completely based on and so I felt I could stand up to it and withstand it, and I guess in a way I did. On the other hand, my wife and I were driven out of the college, so yes, I
No,
survived it.
you lost.
I didn't survive it intact. Right? I made it somewhere else. But that show trial mentality
And
would be a perfect fit for
your
now
standing in the society necessitates a change of your ideas.
being forced to admit things that aren't true. Right?
Do you think part of
The progressive ideas that you have
that we particularly
are what brought
white
you here.
Americans, realize that there's a significant difference. There's a significant disparity between opportunity that people in disenfranchised communities of color have versus us. There's a difference. And so when someone from these critical theory disciplines, should I even say discipline?
Lack of discipline.
When they promote this, people that are in recognition that there is a problem in this country, that there is a situation in this country, and to voice any sort of disagreement with this movement that seems to represent the idea that there is a problem, you become a part of racism. So in order to stand out as not being racist, you are literally abandoning the ideas of science. You're abandoning all this just so that you don't get labeled on the wrong side of history.
Yes, and I was alerted to something a few days ago that I was not aware of, which is, it's going to sound far afield, but what I ran into was somebody describing what had happened to American POWs in the Korean War who were being administered by the Chinese. The Chinese had a very sophisticated mechanism for basically brainwashing. And the mechanism was something that I had seen in this movie, but didn't understand how to follow history. One always imagines brainwashing as this very aggressive thing. But the incrementalness of the move that was arranged for these POWs was the key feature. So the first thing that apparently POWs were asked to do was to write essays. It was really important that they write it rather than just say. That they write essays on topics that any reasonable person was very there's no moral compromise in it.
Right.
Or the other example was one is a problem. Okay, that's right. It's not a problem, but that's right. So people were marched from these very tiny concessions, or real concessions, just you're going to write what I tell you, right, rather than any part of the content, to an absolutely massive shift in their understanding. And along the way, they were, for example, induced to write more substantial concessions with some very tiny reward, like a piece of fruit or something that's actually desirable, and if things are scarce, you can understand wanting it, but it's not such a big concession that you can say to yourself, oh yeah, I said something I didn't want because I got a lot out of it. So you actually talk yourself into imagining that you really do believe the things you wrote. You must, otherwise you would have written it. So what I'm seeing is all sorts of excellent people making the first concessions onto, or the first steps onto the slippery slope, and it's spooking the hell out of me. So, you know, I must say I saw Dave Chappelle's 846. Like you, I thought, wow, do I get what he's saying? On the other hand, I really thought he got it wrong.
What do you think you got wrong?
Well, what he effectively said, what he effectively suggested,
Dave Chappelle,
was that he was on board with the movement, and it was clear that this was based on his massive frustration at how deaf the white population has been to black suffering, which I agree with. I think the white population has been largely deaf, at least in recent decades. But I don't know how much he knows about what the movement actually
Yes!
is.
Yes!
I have the maximum respect for Dave Chappelle. I have for a very long time. Tremendously excited. But I don't know. I mean, I think
He doesn't know. Exactly. He doesn't know he's being blamed. Like people dressing black for protest, they don't know the black symbolizes nihilism and anarchism, and they don't know this shit. They just follow it because someone told them there's a code for a protest, and black is because there's black people. But it's really black bloc, and bad people are hiding in between it. This is why leftists continue to repeat that right-wingers are hiding their power level, because they're doing it. They're doing it.
Is that really the same thing? Is it all one thing?
Well,
They're hiding between the sheep. They're hiding between the innocent people. There might be 8% of communists, but there's like 30% of people are being influenced by communists right now. And they wouldn't be if we told the truth.
Well, you saw it on the ground. The problem with seeing it from a distance is you can minimize many things. When you don't experience the emotions, you don't see the fear, you don't see people running through the parking lot with baseball bats looking for you like they were doing. You know, it's a different thing when you're actually there and you realize that this mass hysteria does lead to pretty despicable acts, and that there is sort of a mob mentality that grips people, and it allows people to be capable of some pretty heinous shit. And what we see here in America is such a combination of factors, right? You have COVID, which shuts everything down, so people are stuck at home for all these months. Then you have this George Floyd thing, which is one of the worst cases of police brutality I've ever seen, because it was so torturous.
Is it? Is it the worst case of police brutality? You haven't seen shit. Where are the videos
horrific that is. And then you have
of like illegitimate interrogations where
all these people taking the street saying we've got to change things, we know things are wrong, and on top of that you have looting, and on top of that you have businesses failing because of looting. You have chaos, people getting their lives destroyed. There's so many things happening all together at once. They call it a movement. It's like one of the things we were talking about with Occupy Wall Street back in the day was we're saying they don't seem to know exactly what's going on, but it's like the immune system surrounding something that's wrong. Like it's like something's going on here. Like all these white blood cells flooding into this area. I forget who made that analogy. It might have been me. It was so long ago. But we're like they don't necessarily know what to do or what it is, but they want to camp out around that area and figure out what the fuck's going on.
Yeah, and like I said, at first I was on board with this, and I thought there was something right about it. And I even thought the leaderlessness of it was great for 2 weeks, and then it became very, very stupid. But yeah, it is an immune reaction, and that's a normal part of history. Revolutions are not started by a bunch of intellectuals who have some idea what's
Exactly.
correct. It's people who are fed up, and so that's what Dave Chappelle was.
No. Revolutions are started by the 8%. Whoa. Revolutions are started by intellectuals only. You don't need anything else. And the rest of the society doesn't even have to agree that's how revolutions are started.
So I'm so afraid to actually go down this next road. But you raised the case of George Floyd and what we saw on that tape. I want you to think about the question of what you actually saw on that tape and what it actually tells you, what you actually know and what you don't know. I'm worried. Look, best possible thing from the point of view of the well-being of the world would be that Derek Chauvin is guilty of murder and he's convicted of murder and he's sentenced for the maximum allowable time. That would be the best thing.
Agreed.
I'm not sure that that's actually what is supposed to happen.
Why is that?
No, he's supposed to get an electric chair.
Did you witness a murder? Are you sure you saw a murder?
No.
What do you mean by that?
Well, murder is a crime.
Yes.
Okay. Presumably, there was a lot of complaint about the fact that Chauvin wasn't charged with first-degree murder, right? But what story would make it sensible that he wanted to kill George Floyd? That was his purpose.
Well, do you know that he knew him? He knew him in advance, and that they had words, and they had problems when they worked together because Derek Chauvin was a shithead to customers, and he was violent to customers. And he and George Floyd worked as bouncers in the same establishment.
Yep. And
that's the word.
Well, from the point of view of the well-being of the world, and from the point of view of us all processing this, in some sense, I mean, with the understanding that there is nothing that could possibly happen in an investigation or in court that's going to bring George Floyd back.
Right.
Okay? So, with that in mind, the best thing that could happen is that he is actually guilty of something egregious. He's charged with it. He's convicted.
Right. But what makes you?
They were friends, but it's racism that killed them. They were friends. They worked together on a different job, but it's racism that killed them.
There are several things about what
bullshit.
What we didn't see but now know, and things that are possible.
And every case is like this. Every time you want to see racism, you lift up the rock of leftism, and you find there is no left. There is no racism. And then, but it doesn't matter because
I would think he obviously was
because most of the God damn it.
It would not be criminal if he was dying of heart
because
attack.
most
What killed him. But what I'm saying is that we're at the case
of
having a heart attack.
the time, people are still gonna list, even if we proved beyond the shadow of the doubt that they were friends and there were no racism involved. They just disagreed on methods. But
we're no longer active.
I'm not an expert, and I misunderstood what I read. But I thought
Derek
things were recently in
thought, I don't know,
I don't know.
he could take it. George could take it.
I am not rooting.
I understand what you're
him
saying.
to be-
The reason why I bring that up is coming from someone who works very closely with the UFC and USADA. One of the things that I find out is that their methods of detection now are insanely sensitive, and you can detect incredibly small, non-psychoactive amounts months and months and months after use.
Okay, well, then it's obviously not relevant. The possibility that he's having a heart attack is clearly relevant.
It's possible. I mean, if he did say he can't breathe, it also could be that he was struggling and that there was a tussle and he's just exhausted and he couldn't breathe. But
or that reports that he said he couldn't breathe until he was on the ground or a room. That's also possible.
it could be a lie. You wouldn't look at what that.
Right.
When you look at what
But
Derek
in any
did to
case,
George Floyd,
there's so many interpretations, but only one is
Well, okay.
allowed, and he will go into the annals of history as being affected by racism in that specific time.
Under some circumstances.
And
those circumstances.
the left is complicit to this lie.
That
It's complicit because it excuses it.
it may be that the policy killed George Floyd.
They excuse it. They allow this lie to happen.
But the guy wasn't resisting. That's the problem. When he's on the ground, he's just got his knee on the guy's
And that's a problem because there's
There's another problem with the way he did
actual
it.
cases of racism. There's KKK members working in the police, and you can't do anything about them because they can hide behind the fact that
And that's
the left is
essentially
crazy.
That drain is laying right where his neck is. I don't know if he placed him there on purpose.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't doubt it.
Well, I'm not saying Derek Chauvin didn't kill George Floyd. I'm not saying he wasn't racially motivated. I'm not saying that this wasn't murder in the first degree based on prior interaction. I'm not saying anything. What I'm saying is that we don't know, in the public, based on what we've seen, we don't know this to have been murder because if this was Derek Chauvin being a dick and using the policy of the police department and being indifferent to its effect, then That is for a court to decide whether or not it is murder. In other words, if he was
Right.
doing the policy as the policy is laid out based on the criteria that would trigger the policy.
Have you read any of this?
What do
About
you
the policies?
mean? I've read a bit.
What have you read?
I
What did
read
it say?
it said, I'm going to struggle for the words that the acronym stands for. A situation called EXES. Extreme. I don't have it. Maybe Jamie can find it.
Okay.
But again, the real point here is not that he is innocent. I don't believe him to be innocent. My real point is that we are all acting as if we have seen with our own eyes something that is unambiguously murder.
Right,
And I
and
don't believe that we saw that.
we've seen in Derek's inside Derek's head.
And that the way that we determine
It's mass
process.
Well,
mind reading.
autopsies, because independent autopsies did find asphyxiation and cut off of the blood supply to the brain were responsible for his death. Now, there was a police department autopsy that was refuted by two individual independent examiners.
You know what you need?
What?
You need a court.
You need a court to examine the evidence.
You need a court to examine the evidence, and you need it to be done in front of a jury that's free to decide either way. And here's what I'm really concerned with. Because we all think we saw a murder, right? We think it's unambiguous. We think it's open and shut.
Right.
The entire case is going to unfold under contract, right? And if he is exonerated, we are going to assume that this is a miscarriage of justice.
Yes.
Right.
Which means, I mean, put yourself in the position-
There's never gonna be a situation when the opposing side accepts
well
the result.
stands in the way
And
of judgment and causes. who knows
I
what to
bet
it.
there's
We're talking about Rodney
I
King
bet there's science about
Times a
this.
million.
times a million.
Particularly if you look at what happened just from the reaction to this one murder.
Right.
I mean, we've seen cops murder people, and we've seen a minimal reaction by the public, just protests and people get angry. This erupted around the world. Nobody anticipated this or saw that. But
Right.
it speaks to the powder keg of circumstances that we were talking about. All this different packed dynamite, COVID, the lockdown, financial distraught.
But can we agree that it could be that his being found not guilty would set in motion events that could be right up to civil war, catastrophic? So if that is the case, what I believe is likely to happen is that he's likely to be convicted respectively. He's going to be sentenced, right?
And you agree that that might be for the best of everybody.
Well, what I want to point
No,
out is that
please don't. Don't be a consequentialist.
the center of what we are as Americans is a country in which you are entitled to due process in a court of law.
Right.
That your guilt has to be proven beyond a reasonable
Right.
doubt.
This is gonna be end of America.
Sacrificing people because there's a mob in the street threatening to turn the place upside down, then, I mean, you know what that is, right? That's the uninvention of America, and, you know...
Yes!
you can't use the term lynching.
I love you, Bret. You're not a consequentialist.
If the mob has decided that they are guilty, then we aren't America anymore.
I think when you look at the spectrum of probability, if you had a pie of is he guilty of murder? Did he murder him by leaning on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, or did he not? I would say did he not is so small, you would have to have a fucking magnifying glass to look at it. If I'm an expert on choking people. You know, I understand what happens to the brain when you cut off the blood supply. I've had it done to me. What that guy's doing is torture. And I think I know I could kill a man that way. I know I could.
Yeah.
If I decided to lean on someone's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds with all of my weight, that's a dead person. There's no way you're going to survive.
All right.
If your neck, one side of your neck is on the concrete and the other side is 200 pounds of my body, all focused on my knee, and I'm balancing my weight on your neck, you're a dead man.
Okay, so...
Okay.
That's what we saw,
Well,
right?
I
know what you're saying, that maybe you also had
No.
but the idea
Maybe
that
that's what we saw.
seems to me to be outside of the realm of possibility.
But
I wanna
we didn't saw
Absolutely.
we didn't see
Okay, I hope this is clear. But in exchange for that, I want
what we didn't see is a
to do
UFC
by the evidence.
fighter kneeling on a guy. We saw a cop
What's supposed to happen? That would be un-American.
and a friend at that
I agree,
probably.
and we are convicted
Colleague
of
from
murder,
work.
but we're doing it based on a video of a man putting all his weight on this guy's neck for 8 minutes and 40. That's when you roll in jiu-jitsu class. Generally, a roll is between 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, or something like that.
What jiu-jitsu class? What are they trainers for the cops? Are they UFC trainers? What what the fuck are you talking about? You didn't see a UFC guy.
See the policy? Did he enact the
No,
policy?
I just can't imagine
What
any
is-
cop would think that that was the way to do it. It's one thing if someone is resisting arrest and they're very dangerous and you're handcuffing them and you put your knee on their neck to hold them down in place. And I think that is a valid move. If you have a guy and he's got a gun or he's wired on PCP and he's very strong and there's a bunch of you trying to hold on to the guy and someone leans on his neck, I'm all for that. But then when you're done, when you got him cuffed, let him go. It's not a threat. That guy wasn't even moving.
I wanted
he was just begging for his life.
I wanted George Floyd to be taken to a hospital. It seems clear to me that he needed to be taken to a hospital. I
But
don't know.
obviously Joe sounds a little more agitated than.
circumstances. One is
When
called
he sped up?
conscious neck restraint, which is an officer applies light to moderate pressure to the side of a person's neck, but does not intend to knock a person unconscious. That could be used against people who are actively resisting.
But he didn't. How do you want? No, the intention was to knock him out. It wasn't.
That could be used when someone is exhibiting active aggression and for life-saving purposes. Again, this does not apply. Department policy said neck restraints can't be used against people who are passively resisting. So right there it says neck restraints should not have been used against George Floyd because he was not violently resisting. That's not what was going on. He was not exhibiting active aggression. He wasn't do that. He was begging for his life. He was calling out for his dead mother.
His mother, I know.
It's horrific shit.
I am feeling the need to emphasize, I do believe I saw a miscarriage of justice, but I know that the American thing to do is to have all of this out in a court of law, where all of the appropriate arguments are on the table.
I agree with you. I don't see a way where he wasn't guilty. But I do agree with you that he should be tried in a court of law. But just based on that, I say he's guilty. And then we're also looking at the comparison between the Rogan case, which I also thought was horrible. And I also said, as a person
He's
who's
guilty
an
of
expert in
what?
martial arts, that was a chokehold. They were saying it wasn't a chokehold. That was a chokehold. But here's the thing about the Eric Gardner case. They should have never fucking arrested that guy in the first place. He was just selling loose cigarettes. Like, what kind of world we're living in where you grab a guy by his neck because he's selling loose cigarettes? And when those guys did tackle him and take him down to the ground and held on to him when he said he can't breathe, he also appeared to be in poor health. And it was likely that the altercation, which probably wouldn't have killed you, killed him. And it was awful, terrible. But this was 100 times worse.
Well, can we come to you say what kind of world we're living in with somebody loose cigarettes on this country? And
Yes.
you know, we can say the same thing with Floyd, right? We're talking about
Yeah, counterfeit $20 bill, it's nothing.
Yeah, right. But I want to go back to what I said before. Police brutality is a feature, not a bug.
Yes, I agree with you.
So what I mean by
Yes.
that is if you are going to
Because brutality is just a wrong word. It's a wrong word.
you are going to have to keep them from revolting.
Already the brutality word is a dog whistle. It's poison.
They feel.
It's poisoning of the well.
Some force that disincentivizes misbehavior, and that force isn't just the police. It's obviously the
Normally, sitting on someone is not brutality. Brutality would be fucking throwing him around. I don't know.
You see police brutality relies on wealthy people if they don't know.
Zapping people with tasers just for fun. That's brutality. Savagery. Acting like an animal. That's brutality. This was
and then the cop shoots him in the back because he's trying to reach the police.
this was as civilized as you can get.
No nothing.
And the fact that this is called police brutality is just, you know those situations are dangerous and life-threatening. Yes, you should act as though any situation with cops is potentially life-threatening. But that should influence your behavior, not make you confrontational.
As being a father and a husband and a human being who's a part of our community. You don't gun him down just because you're a fucking piece of shit. And that's what that guy did.
well.
So it's not just a bug that's designed to keep people of disenfranchised communities from speaking out and demanding their fair share. It's a bug of human beings or a power over other human beings. It's when you know Stanford prison experiments, which of course have been sort of discredited in some ways, that they actually probably wanted out of it. So they expect. But the idea behind it makes sense to us. That if you give people power over people, you kind of tend to abuse it. When people have just unchecked authority over folks, they tend to use that. It's a feature of
That's exactly what was discredited about this study.
The simpler story of my run-in with the cops.
Right.
I know that putting a badge on somebody and giving them a weapon and giving them all of that power
You're you're using a study
very dangerous.
yes.
for a and this is the exact thing that's happening with Floyd right now.
I think that's there as well. I think there's multiple factors.
Well, multiple factors, yes, but let's put it this way. My claim is that opportunity is being split. At the top of the economic ladder, opportunity is widespread. You can do very well. The farther you get down the economic ladder, the less opportunity there is, and the greater the danger of your falling off the bottom. Right? In some communities, you start off.
It's the same thing that's happening with George Floyd, meaning
it's not surprising that people resort to crime.
he's using a debunked
People are wired to pick better
claim, a debunked story as a chain of memes that lead him to a conclusion that's leftist because the memes underneath them were leftist, but none of it is true.
A special problem in America. Can we talk about that?
Sure.
All right. So I want to talk about two things. One has to do with the
Well,
special
I'm not saying that none of the stuff that leftists believe is true. I'm just saying that if you use a study that's debunked and you're still quoting the conclusion of the study as though it's real. You know the study is fake. I mean, not fake, but it shouldn't be trusted. But you're still quoting the result. You're doing the same thing with. If there was an evidence of George Floyd
Kalahari, you can
being manslaughter, not murder, but manslaughter, you wouldn't accept it. You would still say it was a murder. You would still say, oh, there's a police brutality problem in the U.S., and you would think about George Floyd as an example of it.
rendered it non-functional by combining
Because
different places
if you don't
culture of it. And sort of forced
don't
bootstrap
fact check yourself and stop saying things that are not true,
against each
nobody else will.
So it was a systematic breaking of the original culture that Africans had in the New World, and they substituted a version that was not as much of a threat to the slave-holding population, right? And
By the way,
slavery
join my
was
Discord.
not as if, frankly, even we didn't even have the tools to talk about these things in responsible terms. There wasn't enough known about how the mind works and what its relationship is to the body and all. So the thing that makes the black population and the Indian population different, I would argue, is the systematic hobbling of the onboard, the inherited, evolved culture. In the case of Indians, by transporting them to reservations and putting them in schools, etc. The passage of normal culture, and in the case of Africans, it was breaking part of families, keeping people from being in contact with others when they have the right language to talk to and all. So in any case, that carries through to the present. It creates a situation where there has not been access to the materials to fully bring, to fully update.
You're speaking about this almost purely from like an evolutionary biology perspective.
Yes, and I'm afraid that it's not properly going to come through. What I'm saying is that when you have one population in control of how another population accesses the shared culture, that it's never fair, right? So we saw this with the kind of conquistadors who came into the New World and were forcing Catholicism on the Incas, right? So there's always this attempt to hand off culture that serves the powerful and undermines those who might rebel against them. Okay.
No, I think I need to keep.
Let's go back to the question of how opportunity is destroyed. Okay, so some populations have very little opportunity and tremendous hazard quality at the bottom of the planet, and not having enough mechanism to allow you to get back. That creates let's say that those who control or who write the rules of the system do not want revolt, even though this scenario would set them up for it. Right? So one thing that happens is you create a tendency to incarcerate. You have rules that free certain people out of opportunity, and then you have a system that is capable of incarcerating massive numbers of them. We incarcerate a much larger fraction of our population than any number of nation, right? And a very disproportionate fraction of people in that system are black. So here's the part that I don't hear discussed. When you take men out of a population, it has a very predictable effect. Take men out of a population, it undercuts the bargaining position of women in mating and dating. Right? So if you take men out of the population, it means that those men who are still present in that population are in very high demand. Right? And men being men, they're in high sexual demand. It is hard to get them to settle down. Right? A man who has lots of options is much harder to persuade or to become monogamous and participate in traditional things. Okay? So what that does is it creates an environment in which you have many more single-parent homes, many more children growing up.
No, this is bad.
Of course, hobbles the kids who are raised in that situation because humans are so difficult to raise. It's so costly in terms of time, energy, and resources that one person is much harder to bring than two people. And this sets in motion all of the things for which white society imagines that there's some cause inside of being.
No. I need two super long combos to get to S rank. So basically, because there's almost no way to continue the combo when I'm entering the room with the fat guy.
Talking about
but I should be able to continue the combo until that room, so throughout the deck of the ship. And then
look at the economic disparity and crime and the gang problem and the prison problem and the incarceration problem, and they look at that and then they look at STEM as being a completely different thing. It's like what your connection and what you're saying about the fact that the hobbling of these communities is so systemic. It's so a part of how they're established and set up, and it's repeating itself over and over and over again, generation after generation. You know, that in many people's eyes, it doesn't seem related.
It doesn't seem related, exactly, and this is why you need those enlightenment values and the tools that arise out of them.
Right, you need to be able to look at it scientifically.
Right. If
there's no way to look at George Floyd scientifically. This is bullshit, Joe.
Right.
You're not even looking at George Floyd scientifically. You think you do, but you don't.
Right. There really is a problem, and what this movement is doing is it is advancing a phony explanation, bad policy, and then on the other side, everybody who's not going along with this, or a vast majority of those who are not going along, are thinking, okay, this is great. They're complaining about something that doesn't exist. This is nonsense. It's chaos, and it has to be shut down. And so, anyway, the truth is neither of those things. The movement is advancing wrong ideas, But the energy that fuels the movement is about real, legitimate complaints.
Yeah.
And the people who are against the movement because they don't buy what's being said or don't understand the actual unfairness in our system are being emboldened by it. They're not being woken up to it. They're being deafened to the fact that there's actually a problem that needs solving. They're thinking the whole thing is funny to begin with.
Right.
So that looks to me like kind of worst possible. Like we're setting ourselves up not to be able to solve this, and if we don't solve it, we're going to head into chaos one way or another. Even if this dies down, it'll be back.
Yeah. I feel that always when I hear people discuss jobs, like when I hear presidential candidates discuss jobs and unemployment and and boosting up the economy, and like when Trump discusses the fact that when the economy was doing well,
I thought I was blown up.
Black unemployment was at an all-time low, and that he was all these great things were happening. It's like you're not addressing the foundation. You're only addressing like the windows of a house. We keep the windows shut, and this house is solid. But if the foundation is rotten because of termites, and you're just ignoring it, and you just keep stacking boards up to level it out when one side sinks because the rotten wood gives way, you're not fixing that. These are temporary patches. The real issue is very clear. One of the ways I've looked at it is, and this is a very simplistic way that I sort of say, if you really wanted to help America, if you're really patriotic, what's the best way to help America? Well, you'd want less losers. How do you get less losers? You find the spots where the people have an unfair shot, and you fix that. You fix those spots, whether it's the south side of Chicago, whether it's Baltimore. You find these disenfranchised areas, and you fix it. That's the
No.
You give people much more opportunity. You give people, you set it up.
That's
so
not how you.
people
That's how you make
if not the
losers.
same advantage,
If
far
you
superior advantage than they have now.
if you always
Their
help
ability
people
to
that
make it,
lose,
navigate
they will always
terrible
lose.
waters of being a young adult and getting through the system without going to jail and without making terrible mistakes.
you have to somehow get them on the path to winning.
Actually strive for something, and you get rewarded for
And
your
it-
effort. You see
give
other
them a
people get rewarded
small
for that
thing
effort as well, and
that
becomes
they
the
can
model
win, but
that
that
you're using.
that is their own.
The model that we see in a lot of upper middle class
But-
communities. You see, there's a path. Mike made it through. Look at Mike.
But it's not a given.
Mike
Though.
made it through. Look
It's,
at that
it's,
nice
it's,
house.
it's
You see
even
that
impossible to
anywhere.
do.
Whereas in these communities that have been established,
Something
they've had this problem.
they're
for
res-
decades,
they're
decades,
they're
and nothing's
responsible
been done about
for.
it. And so they hear all this talk from politicians about
And see
black
how they
unemployment
do.
and this and that, but meanwhile the fucking neighborhood's exactly the same. No one's done anything to fix it. No one's done anything to. And I think
Give them
it's a
CHAZ.
problem.
Just
In
give
terms
them
of,
CHAZ.
What effort needs to be done to fix it? And I'm a moron. I'm not the guy to fix it. I don't understand how it could be done. I don't know, but I don't. but I
Let
do
them
understand that there's
do
not
their
people
agriculture there.
doing it. Other than
Let them see how.
community activists and
Let's.
some people
How,
that have,
and this
that
has
have activists
always
that have
been my
tried to figure out a way
question.
to do
How
their
well
best to
would
deaden it.
black
It's never
people
been addressed
today
on a
in
national level. It's not
America
addressed like
do
no
on
president
farms?
has ever made
If
it
they
addressed.
needed
Even
to
Obama, where they sat
farm,
down and said, here's the areas of this country
how's their knowledge of
where
farming right
and
now?
this is what we're gonna be fixing.
Is it stored somewhere in generations? The grannies remember how to farm?
A system that is so politically corrupt that it is
Or-
not interested in doing what it needs.
Or would there, if they had a country, would the country be even be able
If you
to
actually want to solve this problem, you have to solve it
have any resources,
system in which people
to create any resources?
corrupt parties, both of which are hell-bent on stealing
And
money from
I
people
think
and transferring it to their
they
accounts.
wouldn't.
I agree.
So
Yeah, that's a problem as well.
I don't think it's a problem as well. I mean,
Some
imagine
would,
for a second.
but it might turn out that
We are facing a
That's
global
not enough.
pandemic, which I do want to talk about.
Okay.
We are facing a global pandemic. We are facing rioting in the streets, a movement that's showing signs of
the one thing that's fun is like
fundamental aspects of
black people. They don't care about ideologies. They don't care about economic systems. They will go with whatever works.
towards the kind of leadership that
So,
Agreed. So that means
so I don't think the future American black ethno state is going to be communist.
those two
And I think the communists that push for that idea,
president
they're gonna find it
changing our course. Right? And this is just built into these
very disappointing when that happens. When the black people reject communism. But it needs to happen. It absolutely needs to happen.
administration at a policy level.
They need to see it.
In some ways, it was worse. So what we've got is parties that decide what we get to choose from, and the game is to prevent us from having any choice that could possibly solve.
Oh, Meisha's Molbug. A little bit of Meisha's Molbug in there.
We have to break their stranglehold. And in fairness, Trump was a challenge to that two-party duopoly. He's not really a Republican, right? But he's also not really an alternative. It's like a third crime family, right?
Yeah.
You've got the Republicans, the Democrats, and now
He sort of
Trump.
co-opted their ideology to fit his needs.
Yeah, but it's not a solution.
Right.
So we have to get that solution, which means we have to get by the party. Trump proved that was possible.
Right. I think if there was ever a time where an independent party has a chance, now's the time. If someone steps in and has a real solution, and also in terms of the distribution of that information, now's the time because you could just post something on YouTube where you're demonstrating like through a step-by-step
Yeah.
process how to do it.
Oh my
Sort of
God,
how to do it.
YouTube
Clips,
politics.
almost like a podcast. And if someone
Didn't you
was,
learn?
a person
Didn't you
substance
learn
that
this is
really
impossible?
we said, that person can really do this. This actually could happen. Let's vote independent. It could happen. They don't have a monopoly on the distribution of information anymore. And that's terrifying to them. They used to be able to count on the shills on the left and the right to get the word out for them. But they don't have that anymore. You have so many people that really don't have an ideological foundation in either one of them that are talking and they're reaching millions of people. That's a rare moment in time. And this is, in my opinion, the very best time for someone to step in that's not, they're not compliant. They don't have to give it, they don't need that policy machine behind them or the political machine behind them.
Well, I've got a plan, but we have to find a really big podcast, I think, to get enough on YouTube.
There's none of those out there.
You haven't encountered a big podcast?
No, they don't exist.
All right, you want to hear the plan?
Sure.
Okay.
The Rock and Jocko Willing. Get them together.
Well, you know, let's put that.
Okay.
Let's put that to the side. It's not part of the plan, but it actually could fit. Okay. So here's the plan. This plan needs a better name. The working title is Dark Horse Hero Plan. And the plan looks like this. We
Oh no, the
draft
one.
two individuals. We find two people. One of them is center left, and one of them is center right. And these people have to have certain characteristics of one themselves. They have to be patriotic, they have to be courageous, and they have to be highly capable. Right? But that's it.
Okay.
Center left and center right. And we pair them together. And we draft them with the following plan. That they
Let's
will
listen to
govern
this. This
as
is-
a team. That is to say, every important decision will be discussed, and they will decide what to do as a team.
Oh my God! No, this is the worst idea ever. This will make it into a marriage. This is gonna be a marriage state.
The president govern alone. Okay. We draft these folks. and
One
then
of them is gonna be
according to
always a woman, and one of them is
and
always gonna be
the
a
president
man.
Now runs for the vice presidential spot, and the one who was vice president now runs. It's gonna continue this way.
No,
until we
this.
vote someone else in. or
How
we
about
have the option.
gendered parties? Why won't we just do that?
We have a patriotic
Just
team
have a
that
party
governs
for every minority.
center left and center right.
But when you say draft,
Well,
that's the
how
problem.
about
Like, someone has
how
to
about
be
let's
motivated
just start
to
with
ruin their fucking
women's
lives, try to run
party
this country.
and
It
men's
doesn't
party.
happen. Everybody
Seems
does it.
I agree,
seems
but then
those
that's an
issues
obstacle
are
that I would argue is solvable, that we know these people.
lining up into
So,
men and
let's just
women
say that's the plan
categories.
so far,
So
and talk about what
let's just
problem
have a
we
men's
solve
party
as much as you
and a
want.
women's party and see how that works. You think that's a good idea? I don't.
But okay, so here's my proposal. So the plan could be right, and my proposal for who we draft could be wrong, and I'm happy to see other people swap them.
Okay.
But my proposal would be Admiral William McRaven on the right. You know who that is?
No, I don't.
Okay, he is a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL. He was until 2018 the Chancellor of the University of Texas. He is a very cogent center-right Republican. He was the lead on the Bin Laden raid. He is, I think, universally respected by people who know not to say negative things about him. On the center left,
Let me see this drawing.
yeah, you're gonna know. There he
Oh,
is.
yeah, I have seen that guy before. I like it. Looks like a president to me.
Yeah, it looks like a president to me too. You know who else looks like a president to me?
Who?
Andrew Yang.
I'm down with that.
Okay.
I like what you're saying now.
Good. So here's my point.
Those two guys together.
Yeah, those two. Is that camera on?
Yeah.
Admiral, your country needs you. It really does. Never more than now. And I know that the job of president is a sucky one. I'm sure the job of vice president is even worse. But please consider this plan because the republic is in jeopardy. Now we already know that Andrew Yang is up for the job because he ran for office.
Yeah.
And, you know, faced appallingly stupid obstacles that, in my opinion, may be the reason that he's not the nominee. So here we got two people. One of them, I think, will do so out of duty. The other is crazy enough to want the job in the first place. And what are they? Well, they're both patriots. They're both courageous. And they're both
I'm not sure if Andrew Yang
Well,
is
I know
such a
I
patriot.
don't know the Navy SEAL gentleman, but Andrew Raven.
Andrew Yang is not tied to any emotions, almost.
And reasonable ideas across the board in terms of many things. Not just universal basic income, which is the thing that he was most popular for, but even law enforcement. He's got some great ideas about a lot of things. He thinks outside the box. He's a brilliant guy.
Open-ended.
Yes. Very
So,
reasonable.
so I would suggest one last part of the plan, right? Which is that we Americans have to get over the idea that when somebody runs for office, especially the office of the president, that the right reaction is to ask them a million questions about what they will do in office, what policies they advocate.
Okay, this is impossible. I mean, you're trying to solve the right problem.
Integrate the information.
Yes,
And in the case of
but this is the wrong
people
solution.
who would do that as a team. What I would really be interested in, as they are running against Trump and Biden, is hearing who it is that they would bring into an administration. How would they make decisions about the things that matter to us? And figuring out who they would bring in, I think, is bound to be far more informative than dogging them about what they're going to do about healthcare and how they're going to pay for it.
The thing about asking someone what they're going to do, though, is it does influence people whether or not they're willing to vote for that person. They want to see a plan. I know what you're saying is a reasonable person who understands the system, but for the average American, they do want to see a plan to how to get out of a lot of the messes that we see.
Well, you know, the funny thing is, we think a lot of things are true about what people want. One thing we've been told that people are stupid and that, you know,
Yeah.
and if you're really one of the earliest innovators here. You have found the people that we've been told have an attention span so short that they can only deal with a sitcom are interested in a 3-hour conversation.
They're all in the gym, dude.
From all over the map, right? People already.
Most of those people are in the gym.
Have a wrong idea. Right? In our sense of what elections are. Maybe that wrong idea isn't even.
You think
about
these
that.
people vote?
We want to hear the plan. It's about the fact that we know that our power in the system is so limited that the only
I mean,
way
they
we
do
can possibly
vote.
exert
But they vote
influence on
right.
the policy that gets made is if we can get somebody to promise us something into a camera enough that they're embarrassed not to do it and they get enough. We also know that doesn't work.
Right. As soon as
So-
you get in the office, just do whatever you're going to do.
Right. So my point would be, look, I will literally vote for any competent, courageous patriot. I actually don't care in what direction they're going. Yes, I would prefer that they were progressive because I believe we need to make progress or we will perish. But any courageous, capable patriot is good enough because a courageous, capable patriot will do way better than we are doing with the current plan.
You know, and I'm seeing this one thing that I keep hearing over and over again from people on the left that really disturbs me. It's this concession that what you're voting for is the cabinet. You're voting for the Supreme Court. You're voting for someone who's not going to reverse Roe versus Wade. That's what I keep hearing from my friends on the left. And you know, they've basically just made this concession in their head, like, hey, you know, this is what I'm voting for now.
They've given up.
And the news media on the left has completely ignored all of these Biden speeches that clearly show some sort of cognitive decline. In fact, I've actually, like David Biden, who I respect a lot, he was kind of arguing against it, that it didn't show his decline. And I was trying to look at it in a way that it made sense. I was trying to be rational about it. I'm like, okay, maybe he's just exhausted, or maybe this, or maybe it's pressure. You know, sometimes people get really tongue-tied and panic under pressure, and words come out all fucked up. That is possible, but there's a trend. And if you go back to when he was a younger man, that trend didn't exist. You're seeing a change, and the idea that as you get older, you become less comfortable with the media, less comfortable with speaking publicly. That doesn't jive with me.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense.
So, like, I agree with you. I see a decline. But irrespective of what that is, Joe Biden is an influencer.
Yes.
He's not an idea guy. Right? He's the same.
Where's my second
idea as
dash?
Hillary Clinton in a different morphology.
Yep.
This is not an answer.
Yes!
To no question.
Yes, Bret, I love you.
Right.
So,
I'm all for. When I listen to Bret Weinstein, I'm all
They
about.
did it to us before this moment happened. That's the thing. They did it to us before COVID. They did it to us before the looting and before the
it
demonstrations.
was this moment.
I think they thought it was going to happen the way it happened. I thought I feel like they felt that if they got Joe Biden in there, if none of this stuff had happened, he would just be dealing with one solution to the problem that is Donald Trump.
Right, but even if we bend over
The
backwards,
problem is not Donald Trump.
yes, it
That's
is.
not the problem.
That COVID-19 was going to spread, right? And we didn't know that there was going to be massive riots in the streets over how many cities. We should have known that this was building, right? The possibility of a pandemic was always on the table. The fact that we have a pandemic and that makes it clear why we need a cogent leader. It was obvious that this could happen under any presidency.
Yeah, but there's a lot of other things. I mean, it's hard to say that the possibility of a pandemic is on the table, so we should have been prepared for it. I mean, the possibility of an asteroidal impact is on the table. The possibility of a solar flare that wipes out the power grid, always on the table.
Yeah, but you're making my point. My point is, you can never afford to have somebody who isn't a courageous, capable patriot in that office. How dare they play games with this? It's not theirs to screw up.
Right, and this also has highlighted the problem of Donald Trump's ego.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people would say his ego's, yeah, he's got an ego problem, but look, he's getting the job done, he's doing great things. But then, in the face of this pandemic, when he's being criticized, like almost to the point where he can't handle it anymore. You know, like some people can run at a pace of 5 miles an hour, but when you force him to run at a pace of 7 miles an hour, things get slippery. You know, you start feeling cramps, you start looking for a way out, and he's right now about 9 miles an hour, and it's not looking good. I mean, he's tweeting about not falling down a ramp. And why were you walking like that? He's, the fake news media, why was it a slippery ramp, and I'm not going to give them a ring. Like, what the fuck are you even paying attention to?
Yeah.
The fact that your ego is so fragile, you're paying attention to criticism the way you walk down a slippery ramp. Like, they would have ignored that. It would have been a non-issue. But it's an issue that your ego is so fragile that you have to face the fact that they're criticizing the way you walk. Down with fucking slippery dress shoes on. Those shoes suck.
I never wear them.
If you wear those, I went to a cowboy boot store the other day, and I was like, "What can you do with these?"
I can make an S rank.
Get away from something.
I can make an S rank
I can't
here.
run these fucking things on.
Yeah, no, they're for dancing. So you can.
Yeah, you slip around with them. But that's what dress shoes are.
Yeah.
They wear those leather-soled dress shoes that slip like crazy. There's no tread on them. They're nonsense. That's what that guy's wearing, walking down a ramp.
Well, and
You're
you
wearing
say,
a nice pair of Adidas with some good traction.
I agree. I always wear practical shoes because you never
Yes,
know when you're
you
going to
never
need
know
to
when
run.
shit goes down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
So
it's the ego. It highlights. It gets really magnified. You find the weaknesses in the system, and the system gets tested. Now it's being tested across the board.
across the board, and that insecurity, believe me, our enemies know it's there.
Oh, for
And
sure.
they know enough games.
Yeah.
We have to escape this. And to my friends who are still believers in the Democratic Party, which I have many, if you hate Trump, right? If that's really your cause, and you're not going to be able to see clearly anything until we are removed him from office, that is also on the Democratic bill. Hillary Clinton advanced Trump's candidacy because she wanted to run against him. So
Yes.
if if you have Trump derangement syndrome, you still have to be angry at the Democratic Party for putting us in this predicament.
Yeah, she legitimately thought he'd be the easiest to beat, so she severely underestimated people that were upset at the current system, and that his rhetoric, this idea of draining the swamp, would actually resonate with so many people. And also that people look at things in a very two-dimensional way. You know, they're not looking at it in this really complex, nuanced way. And if you can paint a couple of good slogans together, build that wall, make America great again, all that kind of shit, that's a brilliant way of manipulating people, because that's the stuff they remember. And he's a master at it. Sleepy Joe Biden, crazy Hillary Clinton, Lion Hillary, you know, crazy Ted, Lion Ted. He has all these nicknames for people. I don't even remember most of them, but there's some brilliance in it.
Oh, he is a political genius.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, a manipulative genius in the sense that he understands how to use the media, because he's been in it forever. These fucking people have been in it in this Bush League way. Like, you don't even know what it's like. You have a real master communicator in that role. If you had someone that was a master public speaker in that role, really knew how to give a blistering takedown of someone like Trump or someone like Biden, easy. Both those guys,
Yep.
they're vulnerable as fuck.
They are. And let's get them the hell out of there. As you point out, and you are dead right about this, if ever there was a moment, this would be it.
Yeah, this would be the moment. But do you think you can get that guy to run?
We have to draft him. It's a matter of duty. And
What's he doing right now?
I don't know. I think he may have retired after he left the chancellor position.
Probably right now digging a bunker somewhere outside a window. Fuck this place.
But, you know, I mean, look, the way you would draft somebody like that is you would let them know that we'd have their back, right?
Yeah.
They would earn our loyalty, and they would have to have it. But if they did, then it's the perfect moment.
Do you think there's enough time? Here we are in the middle of June. Was it the 16th? 15th? What is today?
16th.
16th of June. July, August, September, October, November, 5 months. After the world, we could be speaking Chinese in 5 months.
Look, Joe, you ain't kidding. Look, the thing about 2020 is you can make an argument about what's possible, but 2020 is not the year to make such an argument in, because
it threw all the fucking wrenches into the gears.
every wrench.
All the sand into the oil.
Into the eyes.
Oh my God, it's fucking crazy.
I'm going stark raving sane.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I think. So
Stark raving sane.
I do.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the lockdown?
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. I'm not speaking in a vacuum here. I've heard a certain amount of your take, and my take is a bit different. I am very concerned about SARS-CoV-2. I'm not concerned about it because it is as lethal as we feared it might be. It isn't as lethal as we feared it might be. But I'm afraid of it for other reasons. One, it is brand new to us. It just showed up in the And so, in my opinion, we screwed up the lockdown badly because we went halfway. But a very short, very intense lockdown could have ended it, and that would have been the smart thing to do. And unfortunately, the political will was not there. But I am looking at the utter end. Can you imagine at this moment SARS-CoV-2?
Yeah, they nailed it. But they also have so few people.
Oh, they definitely had it easier. But the point is, they did prove it was possible.
Yes.
So, in my opinion, we should have locked down severely for 6 weeks or something along those lines, and we should have driven it to extinction. And the problem is that runs afoul of all kinds of things, including civil liberties concerns, which I also hold. I hate the idea of a government crackdown on kids with whom we associate and all of the rest. I hate it as much as anything. But we are dealing with a brand new landscape when it comes to a global pandemic. And what's more, we are dealing with a virus that I think is not what we have been told it is.
How so?
So I have, initially, I thought that this was a bat-borne virus that had been transmitted to people from the wild, probably through the bushmeat trade, probably through the seafood market. In fact, Heather and I were in the Amazon with no connectivity to anything for a couple weeks. When we came out, what was then called novel coronavirus was just beginning to be discussed. And so we became aware of it as we came out of the Amazon. What the heck is that? And I looked into it, and immediately I saw the story adds up. So the coronavirus at the time was circulating bats. There's a seafood market, and I thought, okay, I know what the story is, and I tweeted. I don't know enough about the story yet, but the seafood market is the source. The virus comes from bats, and we have to talk about the bushmeat trade, which is obviously terrible. And immediately people tweeted back at me, so you think it's just a coincidence that there's a virus seafood let up before and Wuhan where they started? And I thought, that's a heck of a coincidence. And so I started to look into it. I retracted the tweet. I said, maybe I don't know enough.
Only my chat is like that. Say
down
anything you want, but I'll say anything I want back at you.
a huge range of experts that this has to have been.
Or maybe not everything you want, you know. Freedom of speech, except incitement to violence.
And the story that is looking more and more is looking ever stronger. And anyway, I've been.
But basically, I don't care what your
But in a sense, again, we still don't know. It is possible.
political leanings are.
But the virus itself.
You missed the best part of the podcast, I think. This COVID stuff is getting quite boring. Although, maybe they're going to talk about Bret's podcast with the Russian guy.
The fact that it was manipulated in a lab. So one of the techniques that who study viruses like this use something. So the research is called gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function research means you are taking a virus and you are adding capacity to it in order to study how it works. One of the things that is done to study how it works is something called passage, where a virus is infected, a creature is infected with the virus, and then the virus is allowed to pass between individuals of that species. It can also be done in tissues, in cellular tissues, where tissues are infected and the virus is allowed to spread.
Moderately open.
And what happens is evolution. So there's a slight possibility
Depends on what the discussion is about, really.
in the laboratory, and when you're dealing with consequences that are the result of that enhancement that make it more dangerous than.
There's subjects I
What do you believe?
don't care about too much.
Well, so one of the enhancements, there is a something called a furin site.
What do you have in mind?
Site in the genome of this virus. Furin sites are not known. Doesn't mean they don't exist. They're not known from other beta coronaviruses. And this furin site is conspicuous. It's conspicuous in that it is in the genome as an insert rather than mutations of sites that are there. It's like somebody spliced it in.
No, I don't care about those too much.
But,
No.
it may well not.
Why?
And it has a-
But why those ones particularly?
Because this is
Why?
probably,
Why that one?
nucleotides.
So many important things going around the world,
Which are made out of
and you think
an
about
amino acid called arginine.
LGBTQIA.
Arginine is coded for
plus.
in this virus. But because there are so many possible codes, triplet codes, and only 20 or so amino acids, there's redundancy. And so which code is used to trigger the production of or the inclusion of an arginine is variable. And two arginines are coded for
I don't know.
seen in
Why is it important? Why do you think it's important?
elements of the genome that are conspicuous and suggest possible arbitrary manipulation. The furin site that I referred to, that has been inserted either by a natural process or by a laboratory process, greatly increases the transmissibility of this virus, which means various things. It could be the explanation for why this virus is infecting so many different tissues in people who get sick. The list of symptoms is huge, and that's a very troubling thing from the point of view of treating it medically. All of the things that can go wrong with your body once you're infected. It also means that the virus is very good at jumping between people, and that high transmissibility is obviously one of the things that makes COVID-19 such a difficult pandemic to control. It's hopping between people so readily that it runs away. So, in any case, and then there's a third question I have, which is maybe there's something about the fact, the fact is it is a fact, but if this was an escape from the laboratory,
Legalized
then the
healthcare
virus,
discrimination
just as
and new laws
we're talking about the
finally being
yes,
passed.
which you spoke to Eric about when he was on your podcast.
But
Evolution
again,
to the lab, evolution in the lab takes place, and changes that the people
there's
in charge
a bunch of
occur
laws
when
being
they're not
passed
thinking
in
about
other
it.
areas that are not
Environment.
important in general.
Labs are
I don't think LGBTQIA is so important that you need to talk about it. And also, if you're talking about discrimination in healthcare,
That's a very
what's your definition of
so
yeah? What's your
Is it
definition of
possible that the virus has
discrimination?
adapted
Discrimination
to the
goes
lab
on in
environment
healthcare
and that it has
all the
forgotten
time
that it
for
can be
everyone.
outdoors, and if we are casual about the outdoor environment, then actually it could relearn that.
Everyone has their wishes denied in healthcare. We all want different things to be done for us by
And you end up way less sick.
by the state. I'd like my teeth done,
We should be outdoors. We should not be
but
outside those environments at all. We should also be
I don't think it's an important issue.
right? Because
Not for
anytime we allow it to be
politically.
transmitted outdoors, that creates an evolutionary.
Politically, like an interesting, difficult,
It's not something we want at the moment. This might be an advantage, and we're going to lose it if we
and
don't. Why?
and current issue is like how do we solve polarization? That's an interesting issue.
Because even though I think the virus is very difficult to transmit outdoors, which is something we've seen in the data out of South Korea, for example, it could
But
be natural.
this group or that group having more or less rights, I don't.
And there's no good reason.
Not interesting.
We shouldn't, because it could be
I mean, those discussions happen. You can have them, but
stuff. But if it's UV light, then that's it's difficult to transmit outdoors during the day, and it should be easy to transmit outdoors at night. If it's not UV light, then that's not likely to be it. So there is something weird going on with viral load. Maybe it's not weird, but it's weird for those of us who learned how viruses work from the usual textbook diagrams, where a virus gets into a cell and triggers an infection. But here, it seems like if you talk to someone briefly, your chances of picking it up from them if they're sick are pretty low. If you talk to somebody for an extended period of time, you're constantly breathing air that they're exhaling, then your chances are low.
So there's a possibility that just exposure to UV light, as people are, even if they're outside talking for the same amount of time, just the fact that these particles are going through the air in the sunlight, that it kills the virus's ability to transmit.
It's possible. I don't know that that's
Which,
what's going on.
when you think about things like, you know what a steri pen is?
oh, Flam, where's
Yeah, so you
where's
need water
Adam and
that's
Destiny?
used to drink Creek water.
On
It's crazy.
Killstream?
It's not- doesn't
On
even take that long.
Killstream
Yeah.
tonight?
Just one, you put it in like a bottle, a water bottle, and you spin it around in this creek water. and it
Discrimination
kills
is
all
the
that stuff.
exclusion of groups of
It's
people.
weird, man.
Hold on,
It's
let me
weird that the light
pause,
can do that.
Oh, my
Joe,
goodness, well,
because no, No, that's actually not what discrimination is. Hold on. Etymology. Discrimination means telling one thing from another thing. And if you don't believe me, to discriminate is to tell a difference, or to say that something is more important than another thing. 1620s. Distinguish from something else or from each other. Observe or mark the differences between. From Latin discriminatus, past participle, discriminare, to divide, to separate. Dividing and separating are not negative words. You need to be able to tell the difference between two things. Yeah, Merriam-Webster, whatever, it's a dictionary. But this is where the word comes from Latin, from being able to tell the difference between two things. If you're telling me there's discrimination going on in healthcare, then obviously there's discrimination going on. There has to be. There has to be, because there's discrimination primarily based on age. The older people are helped less than younger people in productive age, because both the doctors and the older people know that the older people are closer to death, so there's no point investing resources into them, and that's why they want to help younger people. But then the younger people want to smoke and drink and do all this kind of fun stuff, and what doctors are angry at them, but they can't really tell them that this is bad. But that's a different subject. But that's the primary and bigger source of discrimination inside healthcare than any other. LGBTQIA is like tiny compared to this. But do you even want to solve it? Is it the kind of discrimination that you want to solve? Is it in there for a good reason? I don't know. That's an interesting question. They have a different meaning. Oh, Sitch and Adam friended on the kill stream. That's gonna be awesome. By the way, Flam, how long till you're streaming? Oh, Adam and Destiny. It's gonna go into objective morality, I'm sure. I'm sure of it. They're gonna touch it. They will have to. Okay. Wow, if Dami could call in, that'd be sweet too. I bet Dame has some spicy Destiny clips somewhere out there. Ah, the debater is gone. I need to talk about LGBTQIA issues. Oh no! Older people are much more discriminated than any other group of people. Doesn't like to hear about important stuff. I think I'm gonna have to put my my details in my Twitter finally. I didn't want to, but if I'm doing this, if I'm streaming, if I'm getting shoutouts from Flamenco, and I'll probably have to put in this. I don't want to, but I will. I'll be on for like another half an hour. Right, so I'm supposed to put
UV light is amazing stuff.
Yes, but you know what happened when Trump said something about getting UV light into the body? Well, there was an actual publicly traded biotech company that had an invention for when people are intubated, taking this tube with UV light and inserting it into the lungs of these people. And they were actually pulled off of Twitter. Twitter actually banned their account because they thought there was some wacky Trump supporter who was trying to substantiate the president.
I don't know if I'm gonna be streaming on Saturday because my wife and kid are coming back from the hospital tomorrow, so that entirely depends on.
When they have been intubated, when they are on this ventilator, this
we have a small house. Everything is super loud. It depends. I might do like a quiet stream when I'm just playing and not talking too much. And play some Witcher instead of this thing because this thing is a bit loud. So it's not going to be the political stream, but I could do that. We'll see.
It could be used to purify blood and things. And I was sort of surprised to discover it, and I heard the president say this. I thought that's what he's talking about. My guess is something crossed his feed. Somebody in a briefing said, "Well, Mr. President."
And by the way, I gave you
therapy, blah, 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 UV light, blah, blah,
I
blah,
gave
blah,
you a role on my Discord. You can join my on-air room. You can see it now, and you can join it whenever you want.
Oh. No, she's not the one who did the thing where, was it Dr. Fakenstein or the Fakening?
You want to talk about anything?
Baby? Have you ever seen that one?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, that one's wonderful. That's one of the best ones ever.
You haven't run into Sarah?
I may have. I've seen so many people mock him. It's so hard to keep track of who's who.
Okay, but
there she is?
Yep.
Let's give her some volume on that.
More for the black community than any other president. And let's take a pass on Abraham Lincoln because he did good, although it's always questionable. You know, in other words, the end result.
We are free, Mr. President.
But we
He
are
did
free.
pretty well.
You understand what I mean. So I'm going to take a pass on honest Abe, as we call
But
it.
you say you in general.
That is the dumbest fucking thing a person's ever said. Well, he's done more than maybe Abe Lincoln, who freed the slaves.
He's giving Abe Lincoln a pass because he did pretty good.
How crazy is that?
It's crazy.
Right. It's just like he's stuck. He said something and then he gets stuck trying to substantiate what he said. He should have said, except for obviously Abe Lincoln who freed the slaves, and everyone would have been like, yeah, okay, braggadocious, but perhaps reasonable.
It's wrong and stupid, but at least it's not crazy.
It's not absolutely fucking insane. Yeah, and then the fact that he's saying it's a black woman, it's like, oh my god.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is he's winging it. He's winging it.
So that's what she's doing. She's just lip syncing.
Well, unfortunately, I don't know whether the audience saw it in sync or not.
Find the baby one. The baby one. If you don't have it, I could airdrop it to you. The baby one you need to see.
Okay, I got
it's,
the baby
it's fucking
one.
amazing.
All right.
Somebody, it was either the Fakening or Dr. Fakenstein. Do you know who it was, Jamie? Do you remember? One of those fake artists who takes, they use the face swap technology, and they put Trump's face on his baby. And then they changed the words. Someone caught a baby doing something, and they talked to the baby, and the baby was trying to lie and get their way out of it. It's like an old video, but then they put Trump's face on it, and then they changed. Here, go ahead. Turn it. This is the original baby.
Yes, you did. You touched his food.
It's adorable.
Hire my lawyer. Your Honor, may I?
Yeah, fast forward. So now.
President, you said the virus was just like the flu. You also said the virus could go away by age. No, sir. You said it would disappear like a miracle. Yes. You said
Find it, folks, who's listening to this, you should see it because it's really disturbing seeing a baby with Trump's face. It almost looks like Sam Kinison as a baby.
That's actually pretty funny.
Anyway, which brings us back to McRaven and Yang.
What's still the COVID stuff?
Yeah,
we haven't
I'm
really.
just kidding. Yeah, so what I would say is, first of all, I do think I am very much in favor still of driving this thing to extinction by being properly sober about it briefly.
Can I pause? There's one issue that seems to be when it seems to be an issue when someone says that it might have come out of a lab. This is a right-wing, left-wing thing. For whatever reason, you get labeled a right-wing conspiracy theorist if you think it came out of a lab. And you.
There we go. So you were saying, Joe, that Trump's response was bad to COVID, parroting basically what the S3Ws are saying right now. But wait till you listen what Bret thinks about COVID. Holy shit!
And it's hard to escape it, right? So I've tried to be very careful. I've described it as a hypothesis, which is what it is. I've tried to show that there are different probabilities for the different origin hypotheses. Even China now admits that it wasn't from the food market. Oh yeah.
What do they say it's from?
Well,
Oh, they say it's from us.
I have not heard that.
I have.
But let's put it this way. There are one of the things that is, in my opinion, the strongest piece of evidence that the lab leak hypothesis may be correct is that there is a missing phase in the evolution of this virus. When a virus jumps from one species to another, it is not well positioned. It is typically very poor at its job because it doesn't have any evolutionary experience with that host. So it's not good at leaping between that host cells, which is in very small numbers, and it's not.
I covered this hypothesis on my stream.
When something leaps into a new species and then it becomes endemic because it has solved that second problem. It has figured out how to infect that creature in such a way that the creature spreads it to others of its kind. There is no evidence in the case of this virus that that happened. It showed up in Wuhan and spread immediately. It became pandemic. It already had experience. Now, how it got that experience, we don't know. There are evolutionary ways this could have happened. Right? It could be that we have not found the initial population that it circulated in, right? Or it could be that it circulated in a creature that we haven't found either. But the fact that there is no evidence that it shows up in Wuhan and immediately spreads tells us that this virus was well adapted to our cells and well adapted to transmit between individuals. And that is conspicuous. One way you get it is if somebody added components to a virus in order to make it transmissible to humans. So the research in question would be research that was interested in discovering what a pandemic in humans of a bat-borne coronavirus would be like, so that we could do something about it. Maybe we could prevent it. Maybe we could create a vaccine ahead of time. But if you're creating
I hope this is
a virus that has enhanced capacity to infect humans,
this is
what will happen if the virus ever escapes?
good audio quality
You are running the risk of the virus
for what
spreading
Bret is saying because
They
it's
added something
super,
else to the site. Absolutely.
super
It's
important.
established in the literature that the addition of burn site makes the virus much more transmissible in human tissue. So if you're going to study it, this would be high on your list of things to do. You could also pass it through human tissue to effectively train it on the infectious pathway inside of people, which again, we might be suffering the downstream consequences of that if it escaped the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So these things have an amazing impact, and I hear a lot that what does it matter, it's with us now, we just have to deal with it, which is nonsense, because A, we need to have it never happen again, B, there may be things that we can understand about what its nature is that would help us fight it, but C, we have a really serious problem now, because all but a few of the world's leading virologists, the experts on coronaviruses in particular, have sworn that this must have come from nature and couldn't have come from the lab, which is nonsense.
Why do you think they did that?
Unfortunately, this goes back to our earlier discussion. Our scientific system is broken. We need our scientists to be empowered to tell us what we need to know, and we need them, therefore, to be freed from a system where they are fighting for grant money in order to continue their work. This entire group of people is now in jeopardy, because if this turns out to have been a leak from the lab, then we are all suddenly going to become aware that gain-of-function research puts humanity in jeopardy, that one accident in gain-of-function research can cause the evaporation of almost how many trillion dollars. It could cause, and this is one of the other things I want to say to you about the danger of letting this virus run its course. If we don't stamp it out, we don't know that people who have been infected are not going to continue to have outbreaks. We don't know that yet. We don't know whether or not people who've had it are going to be immune to it in the future. That's probable, but it's not certain. And we don't know that it's not going to become a permanent fellow traveler of humanity the way flu did. And even if this thing evolved to become flu, if it became as unserious as the flu is very serious. And the cost that humanity pays for having flu circulate every year is immense. So even if the only thing that has happened in the long term is we let it go and evolve into another flu-like pathogen, then we have increased
Oh my god,
flu-like pathogen
got lost in there.
substantially, and that would be a major loss. So my sense that we should be much more aggressive about dealing with this is really about the fact that I think we have a short time horizon in which to deal with it. That if we learn new tricks and we become harder to defeat the longer that we play around with it.
Ah.
It's really, it's the lesson of pulling off the Band-Aid. We're not doing ourselves any favors by pulling it off slowly.
What do you think we should do right now?
Well, I would say, the problem is it's a much harder argument to make now than it was at the beginning, because we're all so freaking sick of lockdown. Portland is still under full lockdown.
But not when it comes to protests.
Well, of course not.
That's the other problem, right? There's a massive hypocrisy in the way we're treating businesses versus treating protests.
Oh, it's an epidemic of hypocrisy.
Not only that, de Blasio in New York City won't allow people, when they're asking people that have tested positive for COVID-19, you're not allowed to ask them whether or not they've been in a protest. So they're doing contact tracing without valuable data because they want to be progressive.
Oh.
Well, he's insane.
Yes. So you asked me what I would do. I would, and again, I don't want to be in this position, months in here. I want to be in this position months ago. Saying the right thing to do is a 6-week lockdown that will be unbearably painful, but hopefully will be short, and then intense contact tracing.
But we've done a lockdown with essential businesses open.
Well, we've done.
So that's not a real lockdown.
We've done a half-assed lockdown, and the thing that we've done that I find the most troubling is that we have not bootstrapped a mechanism for high-quality, ubiquitous testing. Because if you want to do, if you did a 6-week lockdown, a real lockdown, right? Hold your breath, get through it, and then you open back up with testing that's so high quality and so universal that you can spot anything that happens and you can treat it locally, right? You don't come into work if you don't pass this test, and if you're working in contact.
Oh shit!
If you did that, we could have driven it to very low levels, and then we could have dealt with the flare-ups. But what we're doing now is we're just gambling, and it's insane, right? We're gambling, and there's no, that I can detect, there's no movement that says open back up and be very aggressive about things like masks. My feeling is if you're pushing open back up, you ought to be pushing things that would make open
Yes.
back up safe. As possible.
Yes.
But are masks really effective?
Yes.
One of the things that the CDC
They
says
are.
is that you should really only
They've
wear
always
masks
been
if you're a
effective.
person with COVID.
Yes, except that we can effectively know that what they were really, I don't even want to give them credit for really saying it. The motivation for saying that nonsense was that they were trying to preserve.
Exactly. WHO are
They
consequentialists.
lied, flat out. Which some of us were not. Some of us were shouting and saying this is garbage advice.
Yeah.
And your question is, do masks really work? Masks work when both parties wear them. They work really well. So, and I don't know why we are pushing this madness of masks that scream medical. Right? So one of the things.
Bank robber.
Yeah, man.
You know what's called bank robber?
I'm mojito bandit.
Yeah, you've got a bandana.
I do.
Yeah.
But, the fact is, the bandana, all right, maybe I look like a goofball, but the fact is, it's more fashionable, in my opinion, than a medical
Oh,
mask.
you're being fashionable. That's cute.
It's also more comfortable, though.
Yes,
So the
for
fact is, I have it. I can pull it up as needed, put it down. It's not hanging on my ear. And that flexibility, the fact that I don't feel so terrible walking around with it, actually makes me use it when I should use it.
The best is really a neck gaiter. Have you ever used a neck gaiter? Yeah, you wear them when you're hunting. You want to obscure a lot of your face, so animals can't see it. It's all camouflage. It breaks up the pattern of your face. It really, you can just slip it back down again, pull it back up, and it actually stays in place.
That makes total sense. But
Yeah.
I mean, the funny thing is, I'm an animal biologist, so the same thing for spiders, but I've never heard that.
You never heard of a neck gaiter?
No, I've heard of a neck gaiter for other things, but not for hunting.
Oh yeah, well, super common. Yeah. Pull up is a photo of me in Lanai wearing a full Sitka outfit. I look like a ninja. Lanai is a very interesting place to hunt because it's one of the few places where you can say it's mandatory to hunt animals because they have an invasive species called axis deer. That's me. See that thing on my face? That's a neck gaiter. And it's actually in the Sitka, the hunting gear that I'm wearing, it's actually built into the hood. So it's not just something that you wear around your neck. It actually is built into it so it slides up and it goes down on your neck if you like it to, but then when you're moving forward, it can slide down. These animals that live there, there's literally 30,000 deer on an island of 3,000 people. And it's an invasive species. They were brought there and given to King Kamehameha by the by India in like the 1800s, and there's no predator. So they're just out of control. You've never seen anything like it. It is crazy when you're there. Like the mass populations, and it happens to be one of the most insanely delicious animals as well. Also super switched on because they evolved to avoid tigers. Dude, I've got videos of these things where an arrow is coming at them from 80 yards, and as the arrow is about 15 yards away, they hear it and they get out of the way. They move so fast. Like they're the fastest deer I've ever encountered in my life by far. Like nothing's even close to them. And you have to be sneaky to get close to these things.
Yep.
That's why you dress like that.
That's cool in some
Yeah.
sense. So actually, can I connect that to
Yes.
the viral question?
Sure.
Okay, so the connection's going to be a weird one. There is only one terrestrial mammal natively in Hawaii. There's only one terrestrial mammal species. Okay, there's aquatic, there's whales and things, but there's only one terrestrial mammal.
I'm trying to guess what that would be.
Yeah.
A mammal. Terrestrial mammal.
Well, terrestrial may be misleading here. I just mean on land.
Oh, seal?
Nope.
No?
Well, they're seals, but that's an aquatic mammal.
Okay.
It's a bat.
All
Here's
right.
the thing. Hawaii is as
It's a
remote
fucking
from
bit, man.
mainland as anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? It's really isolated.
Yeah.
And that means that the story of how a terrestrial mammal gets there is pretty rare. Because when you think about the condition, how would almost any terrestrial mammal get there? So at some point, some pregnant bat probably got blown off course by a storm and probably barely crawled up on the beach.
So they flew thousands of miles?
Well, my guess is it almost never happens. And it did happen once. It's back. But anyway, my point would be, Hawaii is a tropical landmass. You would think it would have high diversity because it's tropical, right? Tropical places tend to have very high diversity. Hawaii has very low diversity because it's so far from everywhere, right? So the thing is, almost nothing can make it over the gap. That big saltwater gap is very hard for anything to cross. So what that means is that everything that's in Hawaii is very well adapted for things like crossing huge.
Everyone,
gaps,
what I'm
not
doing
very
is
well adapted for everything that's
Josh.
in capacity.
Josh's
So
response
that sets
to
Hawaii up for
Discord
being,
stuff is
invaded by any creature that you transport there. If you can solve the how do you jump the gap question by transporting it on an airplane or a ship, then the species that are there are not in a position to fend it off competitively because they're not adapted to compete. It's a low diversity environment where everything had to cross an amazing gap together. So
Jesus.
it's a sitting duck for invasive species like the one you're describing. Okay? Now here's the connection to the viruses. If it is true that this virus originally came from a bat was being studied in probably the Wuhan Institute of Virology, was enhanced and then escaped, was enhanced for the infection of human tissue and then escaped. It is the equivalent of us having transported something very dangerous over a gap it couldn't have crossed on its own, right? And we are sitting ducks for this stuff. So this is why I'm really on high alert about this.
Now, what are your feelings when it comes to the high number of people that are asymptomatic, or the high number of people that get it, and it's a very small deal to them? They just cough for a couple days, and then it's no big deal.
Yes. Well, so I've been advocating from the start that we should be much more aggressive in the way we are studying this. That in fact, remember the aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt had an outbreak, and it docked in Guam. My thought was, I want to see that carrier used to study the virus. It's too bad that it docked in Guam because they ruined the circumstances. It's not that I wanted to see people infected, or it's not that I wanted to see them get the highest quality treatment possible, but it was an isolated situation which you could have studied the spread.
I've already made the comments on this idea Bret has to have a ship with a virology lab. It's just as bad as an idea as anything else. The vector of transmission is going to be exactly the same. It's going to be where you get your food from on the boat, where you get your groceries.
Population where you can actually have enough data to know what these things mean. As it is, we're left with all kinds of questions, right? It seems that some of the people who are asymptomatic actually have significant damage to their lungs. They have this ground glass opacity in their lungs, even though they didn't show us.
What are the numbers of these people?
Well, in at least the months since I've seen them, it was a fairly high percentage, it's like 30 or 40%.
Of the asymptomatic?
So all I can say is that makes no sense.
Right.
You're talking about significant damage to the lungs. It seems like that was in itself.
Yeah, I think the people to study would be those NBA athletes, because a large number of the NBA.
And it's the same problem with the wet market in China. They had a lab. It was very close, but even the lab workers have to eat.
Yeah, I would like them to be studied.
And that's how it gets out. Where you buy your food.
With the sport, you know, you're constantly.
So the ship won't work for the same reason.
Professional basketball at the highest level. I would want to know what's going on with their lungs.
Yeah.
What is it like when you get an elite athlete and you give them this disease? And why are they asymptomatic? Is it a function of their cardiovascular endurance? I mean, is there something about the capacity of their lungs? The fact that they're, I mean, what happens if you give that to David Goggins, for instance, someone who can run 100-mile races and do them back-to-back? You know, someone who's got extreme cardiovascular fitness, like Cameron Haynes or something like that.
Sure.
I want to see that.
We could learn a lot about what this thing is really up to. As it is, we're grasping at straws. We've got a large list of symptoms. We've got people who seem to be asymptomatic and yet damaged. So it's hard to know what to make of it. It's also hard to know what to make of the haphazardness of our response to it.
Yeah.
Like, why are we screwing this up so badly?
Don't you think this? We didn't know what it was when it happened, and then when it did happen, there was a lot of competing information. China was giving us bad information. For one case, the World Health Organization in January was saying there's no evidence that it transmits from person to person. We know that. We know now that that's not the case.
Well, but think about how fucked up our situation is. Right? Imagine that you had some courageous, highly capable patriots government, right? This thing gets detected. You call the right people into the room, okay? You say, okay, what would a reasonable person do about this? But then we've got a problem, right? Now you see another part of our system that has become feeble and inept. You see the virologists have circled the wagons in order to protect their access to grant money. So very
and they will.
Shit, this could be very dangerous. Here's what may have happened, and here's what we would do to figure out.
China are also consequentialists.
Pathology will look like those people may be covering their asses.
They thought, we're gonna lie about the virus. There's only gonna be like 10 people. They contacted the lab and they said, yeah, we worked on the virus, but we didn't do much with it yet. And China said, obviously I'm speculating, heavily speculating, and this is mostly a joke, but and China said,
how do you eliminate all the bullshit? How do we filter it out? What would be like?
We're just gonna lie about the virus because we stand to lose more from trying to protect the rest of the world than we stand to gain if this is nothing.
Pushed out of the system. They've been told to comply with various things. They've been forced to play games that corrupt them, and those who couldn't do it, the ones who will speak the truth even when it hurts them, get pushed out in one way or another. And so, in some sense, this is the moment at which we have to figure out where the people went. And we have to build a system that pays attention to what they've seen, what drove them crazy. Right? So
the consequences are going to be great if we lie. So let's lie about what's going on in our country. Let's lie about the virus. And, you know, there's a bunch of consequentialists out there who would say, no, this isn't real consequentialism.
There's actually less than we are being told. The people who are selling
But it is.
have to study these viruses and gain function research are leading us to believe a virus is going to leap out of a cave at any moment. And in fact, the large number of people who study bats regularly and are not catching these diseases suggest that that's not really true.
Were they the ones that were skeptical about this idea that it came out of this wet market?
No, actually haven't heard from them. But what I can say is there are thousands of people who study bats who handle them regularly and they're not constantly getting sick. So I think what we're learning is that there are a lot of viruses that could potentially jump and could potentially adapt. When they do jump, they almost never spread.
Can I ask you a question before you continue, because I know it's going to deviate us off topic? There was a story that I read a long time ago, and I think I read it in the New York Times, and it was a story about these people that were studying bats, and they had parked themselves out in front of this gigantic cave to sort of film these bats coming out of the cave, and they didn't anticipate that the bats were going to shit on them. And they got insanely sick from some hemorrhagic virus and wound up dying, like shortly afterwards. You know this story?
I don't know this story. I'm now feeling bad about having laughed because they got crapped on by the
I
bats.
know.
It's
I
very
should have
sad.
warned you that it was a bad story. But I remember reading a story that they talked about the millions and millions of bats that flew out of the cave. I believe it was in Africa. They flew out of the cave, and that they shit whenever they fly out, and that these people didn't think about this. They just wanted to film this thing, and they just got covered in bat shit, and it got in their eyes, it got everywhere, and they got a horrible virus from it.
Dimitri talked about this story a little bit.
So
I
there's
just remember them getting really sick and dying shortly afterwards, and them not being able to identify exactly what it was that killed them.
So let me say a couple things on this. One, there is a pathogen that people who study bats in caves, my bats didn't grow in caves, but people who study bats in caves sometimes get histoplasmosis, which is a fungus. It's a fungus that's also afflicts people in the poultry industry. So anyway, that's a danger. There are viruses, but the story that you're describing suggests the pattern that I'm looking at, which is sometimes things jump. They don't tend to spread. Jump and spread are two different skills, and the chances that something jumps are relatively small. When something jumps, it then has to spread. It has to accomplish both tricks in order to become a pandemic. And the likelihood of doing both things well is pretty low. Most of the time it doesn't jump, but it does jump, it does tend to spread. It sounds like your example of these people, tragic as it is, represents a case in which something jumped but didn't spread. Now there is also, the lab leak stuff is extensive, but there is, one of the pieces of evidence in that story is that there were some miners in Yunnan who came down with pneumonia, 6 miners who came down with pneumonia who had worked in a cave that had these horseshoe bats. So to the extent that the lab in Wuhan was known to be working on bat coronaviruses for the purpose of preventing a pandemic, they were getting their bat coronaviruses from this cave in Yunnan province. And the cave was identified because these miners had come down with this pneumonia, of which I think 3 of them died. So it's again a case in which something jumped, but it didn't spread. No pandemic arose out of it. So what we're looking at is a strong possibility that we were looking to prevent the pandemic at some place where something had jumped but had not spread, and that we took viruses from there and imbued them with the characteristics that allowed them to spread, solving its second problem. So that's a frightening story to me.
It is frightening, and is it particularly frightening that it's coming out of China because we're not getting really good information from them because their propaganda is so strong?
Yes and no. Chinese have not behaved well. They have not informed us in the way we need to be informed. On the other hand, one of the reasons this is a political football rather than a scientific issue is that there is a perception, and in fact, the perception has been amplified, that this is potentially, if this leaked from the lab, that this is a Chinese problem.
Yeah.
This lab in China was part of an international community of virology researchers. The grant that they would have been...
Good point.
So this is really, if this is a lab leak...
This is actually, no one talks about
If
this.
this is a lab leak, the failure is one of the international scientific failures.
In this particular lab, didn't they get admonished for something that happened within the last 2 years? They had gotten safety violations.
Yes, and there was a 2015 paper concerned about gain-of-function research and the potential for exactly this sort of thing to happen. So anyway, there was concern, but like so many things, I think it hovers outside of most of our awareness. So we discover, after the Deepwater Horizon accident, we discovered that we're drilling these really deep deposits that we can't believe when it happened. After the financial crisis, we discovered that we're using leverage in a way that can cause these catastrophic economic meltdowns. The Elysian Canyon disaster results that we're storing natural gas in these oil deposits and that it can leak and not be plugged. Fukushima reveals to us what we've been doing with nuclear reactors and spent fuel. We always find out after the accident that we're engaged in some really dangerous thing. Now, people inside these industries know, but they also have a conflict of interest. So nobody warns us, right? And we need to really get ahead of that problem. We need to start finding out what it is that we don't realize humanity is doing that's going to go bad on us next.
Right. Okay, back to the book.
Okay. So I was a graduate student studying bats. I was in Michigan, and I was interested in evolutionary trade-offs. That's my signature thing. And there was a very good piece of work from a guy named George Williams, an evolutionary biologist, about the evolution of senescence, that is to say, the process by which we grow feeble and inefficient with age, what most people call age. And basically, this classic paper explained why it is that creatures like us get old and die. And the answer is basically this, that you have a genome that's complex, it's full of genes, but there aren't enough genes to have a gene for every trait. There's a tiny fraction of the number of genes you would need to cover all of the various characteristics. So genes always do multiple things. And in the case when a gene does something that's very good for you when you're young, at some cost when you're old, selection tends to favor it because you may not live long enough to suffer the cost. And so if you have the trait that makes you powerful when you're young, then it's got some cost that you're going to pay when you're old, but you're not going to live to get it.
Shit!
So
This is not what I wanted to do.
much more clearly than it sees
Just wanted to get out of there.
even at a cost of harming you later. That's the basic answer. It's called the antagonistic pleiotropy theory of classes. But at the point that I started working, we knew that this was right. We could tell that the hypothesis was true because it matched all sorts of observations about wild creatures. Certain creatures live longer than others, even when you correct for things like body size.
I'm dead.
Fly live longer than creatures that are of the same height and size that don't fly.
Or more importantly, my score is dead.
You're more likely to make it to the age. The better selection can see the things that afflict you when you get there. So selection doesn't prefer a bias in favor of youth if you can fly away from danger. Same thing applies if you're poisonous, if you have a shell. You have a really good defense, then selection seems to relate like that. Right? So we knew that this hypothesis was right. But what we had never found when I was working in the very late 90s on this was a gene that matched the description. We knew that selection was finding these genes and accumulating them, but we'd never found one of the genes in question, and that was very conspicuous. I call that the missing pleiotropy. So, anyway, I was sort of on alert for this. I was curious back, and I saw a talk given by somebody who was talking about telomeres. And he was talking about telomeres in relationship to cancer. So telomeres are repetitive sequences of DNA at the ends of our chromosomes.
Okay. That's the mouse bit.
Right? So it's like
That's the mouse bit that's also interesting, but
and it drops to zero. And in,
doesn't add into any of the two discussions.
after that.
Actually, it does add to the discussion about
And the possibility
how
that grow feeble with age.
science,
Cells can't divide anymore.
how STEM is biased, but in a very
This question of telomeres in relation to cancer. And they were saying, Eureka, every time we look at a cancer,
on a very
there's this enzyme
specific
called
scientific subject, but it's still just an anecdote,
And these
so
two
it's
different
not very good.
They were each claiming that they were about to cure their respective
But it's
disease.
but it's
Some group was
interesting.
saying, if
I
we
should
activate
be ending
telomerase, then we can
the stream
make
now
them
anyway.
right. And the other group was saying, if we turn off telomerase, we can cure cancer.
I'll give it
And I put two and two together and I said, this is the missing fight.
one more shot.
That is protecting us, it's helping us in youth. We have a counter, it's limiting the number of times a cell can die, and presumably preventing cancer, right? And the cost is you can't maintain your tissues very much, so you grow people inefficient. So that made a hell of a lot of sense to me. I couldn't convince anybody else that this was sensible. I couldn't even get them to understand what I was
Damn
saying because in evolutionary biology there has traditionally been a bias not against the mechanism, the study of cellular biology.
Telomeres in mouse. And Bret Weinstein. That's a really interesting subject. But
Early in the study of evolution,
I'm afraid it's too narrow for people to care.
thinking about the form of creatures and the behavior of creatures, but not thinking about the internal mechanism.
Just like
I said.
LGBTQIA
I retained it
plus
as cellular biology.
issues.
I saw these two things that needed to be connected, and I started to work on the puzzle. It turned out that that hypothesis would answer a great many questions that were otherwise very difficult with respect to how aging functions. There was one huge obstacle. The obstacle was that the fact that was well known about mice did not fit with the idea that telomeres were fundamental to the aging process. The fact that was known was that mice had extremely long telomeres and that they lived short lives. So if it were true that the length of your telomeres dictated how quickly you were going to age, then a tiny creature with very long telomeres ought to be able to replace its tissues really well, and it should age very, very slowly. So I thought there's got to be something wrong with this. The hypothesis answers too many questions for that obstacle to be real, and I thought maybe one person has run a test and everybody else is just parroting. And I was looking at it, and I finally realized that all of the mice that we had been looking at were coming from one source. That there was a laboratory in Bar Harbor, called Jack's Lab, that was the source for all of the mice being used in all of the laboratories in the country. And I started to wonder, is there something going on with that lab? Maybe mouse telomeres aren't long. Ultra-long telomeres of mice aren't real. Maybe that's laboratory mice. And wild mice would have short.
I was almost there.
This would make sense. And I called up one of the leading people in the field, a woman named Carol Greider, who's now won a Nobel Prize. And I said, Carol, you don't know me. I'm an evolutionary biology graduate student. I have a question for you. Is it possible that all mice don't have long telomeres, but that's really just laboratory mice? She said, well, I think mice have long telomeres, but it's interesting. If you order mus streatus rather than mus musculus and you order them from Europe, then how long their telomeres are depends on what supplier you get them from. So this is interesting. So anyway, we both agreed that it was really interesting. She decided she was going to test the hypothesis. She put her graduate student, Mike Heeman, on the case. We exchanged some emails, and anyway, they tested it, and they got some mice that weren't really wild, but they were much more recently in captivity. And lo and behold, they had short telomeres. Okay, so that was an amazing moment. My prediction turned out to be true, which meant A, that my hypothesis about senescence and cancer and aging might well be true. That was important. But it also raised a bunch of really difficult problems. One was, if it's true that all the mice that are being used to study physiology are broken in this way, then how are we blinding ourselves? Is it possible that we're using all of these mice that would be terrible models for wound healing, for senescence, for cancer, for a whole number of things? How is it that we're allowing ourselves to take these mice who have been altered and using them as models for normal physiology? The other problem, maybe even more serious, was that we use these animals in drug safety testing. And the way we use them is, think about if you came up with a drug that you thought was useful and you wanted to test whether it was safe against your people. You can't really afford to give people a drug and then wait 40, 50 years to figure out what it's important their lives.
Oh my god, I missed the guy.
The way we test whether a drug is safe for long-term use, or whether it is
Let him finish the explanation, let him finish the thought, and then I guess
small
we're
animals
done.
that live short lives, and the assumption that if it's going to shorten your 80 or 90 year life by 10 or 20 years, that it will shorten a mouse's life long enough to see it. Here's the problem. If you've altered a mouse in the laboratory environment by favoring the radical elongation of the skin, then it has the ability to replace its tissues indefinitely. A toxin that will harm you by killing tissue may not harm that mouse. In fact, it may actually help it, because these mice are very cancer-prone. So when we give a toxin that will damage you to a mouse that is highly resistant to tissue damage, you may slow down its tumor. And in fact, we've seen this a number of times, where a drug is given to mice and you get back the paradoxical result. Not only is it not toxic, it actually makes the mice live a little longer. Right? So my contention is that we had a problem where we were testing drugs to see if they were safe on animals that were predisposed to tell us that they were. And then when those drugs were released into the human population, it turned out they were not safe and people died. The problem is, I was absolutely unable to alert the world to this problem for reasons that still elude me. I published my paper, I went through it, I'm going to bore your audience, especially if they've been through Eric's description, with the details of what happened in the attempt to bring this to
Yeah,
attention.
we've heard it from Eric.
But the world of
But
science
he's still explaining it better,
is unwilling to respond.
'cause his
to
brother is-
model organisms as this fatal flaw, and it predisposes to see certain things and not other things in the laboratory environment. The governmental commission that was charged with studying the Vioxx scandal, I believe was like the result of something like this, and it's 300 pages of mention mice. It doesn't.
The Vioxx scandal, which was a drug for arthritis, correct?
Yeah.
It gave people strokes.
Yeah, it did heart damage.
Yeah.
And so anyway, heart damage is actually probably not heart damage. And by that what I mean is, if you take a drug, substance that damages tissues in the human body, it will show up as heart damage because of the special nature of the heart. So let's say that you took some drug that killed every 10,000th cell or every 1,000th cell. That would be destructive all over your body. The heart, though, is a special. The heart has a very low capacity for self-repair at a cellular level. Very low, for reasons we could go into if you wanted. But because it has a low capacity for self-repair, it is also very vulnerable to something that does some kind of general tissue damage. And it's also an organ that, when it fails, it's absolutely conspicuous. So you would expect that if we had substances that were body-wide toxic and we released them into the public, having tested them on mice and not discovering that they're dangerous, that you would see relatively young people die from heart disease before we would detect that there's a problem, before we would detect it anywhere else. So anyway, the government studied this problem after Vioxx, and it put together a report. And the report's 300 pages. It doesn't mention mice. It doesn't mention the genus mus.
Do you think they did that to protect themselves?
Well, what I know is that I attempted to call their attention. After the report came out, I looked at it. You know, it had a physical form, but it also had his own line of searching. And I could see that the humans weren't mentioned, mice weren't mentioned, rodents aren't mentioned. And so I tried to alert them to the fact that they had screwed up, and they blew me off. They wouldn't talk to me. So that is, it raises a question, and I, to this day, cannot answer the question. I can't even say whether or not. So when I tried to raise this issue, I run into various kinds of resistance. I raise it with journalists. When I get back, typically I get interest back at first, and they say, okay, I'm very interested in the story, I'm going to pursue it, I'm going to make a few phone calls, and then they come back to me, and they either take a side, or they say, well, I talked to some people, and they said, it's been taken care of. Right? I don't know what it's been taken care of means. I published a paper that said, here's a hypothesis of what's going on, here's my, I proposed a mechanism whereby to eliminate elongation that happened in the breeding colonies in question. And
It's been taken care of is a very strange way to describe something that could be an enormous problem.
well, not only, let's say that it was taken care of.
Oh my god!
The breeding protocol, and they fixed the problem.
It's kind of hard to get the star and get the,
my paper, which proposes a hypothesis, and I have a right to say, actually, it turns out to be correct, or it wasn't, right? But so anyway, we got back all of these weird answers. It's been taken care of, or
right, Bret. We know this. Try to do some studies in, on ADHD
yeah.
and vaccines, and you're gonna find out
It wasn't that I was told who they
the
were.
same kind of stuff is going on.
This is what they heard. Their enthusiasm evaporated at the point they make a phone call. So,
Were they not aware of the consequences of this problem with these mice?
so again, this is, we have a serious problem. It's not about mice. It's not about virology, right? It's a general systemic failure.
So if they test vaccines on those mice,
Some undergraduate student was an incidents, which frankly
What
woke me up to the
happens?
fact that my colleagues, even when human life was on the line, were going to pretend they didn't know what was going on.
Because they do test vaccines on mice.
Until I put out my hypothesis, and Carol Greider, who pretended she didn't know what I was talking about, published the empirical work that revealed that indeed lab mice are unusual in having long telomeres. After that work was out, there's no excuse for not investigating what the consequences were. I cannot explain it except to say that the culture of science has become so rotten that this sort of thing is standard operating procedure.
Just protecting their ass and protecting the ass of those who give them jobs and all the work that's been done that sort of establishes that they should be doing these tests in the first place.
I'm sure they tell themselves some story in which they are the heroes and they are protecting us from something, but I look at my own message.
Because they're
Even
consequentialists.
though I am aware of what likely happened, I am in no position to protect myself or my family. The only way to be protected from the downstream consequences of this error is to just not take pharmaceuticals. Yeah, it's a really huge problem, and the response of the system generally to shut down the lone individual trying to point out a serious problem is just breathtaking. When you've seen it, when you live it, you never go back. You look into the eye of something that is willing to ignore. It's willing to ignore not only human life, but it is willing to ignore the requirements of good science. How could you leave an error like that undescribed?
And how is this being discussed on a fucking comedian's podcast? Why is this not front page of the New York Times? Why is this not leading on the news when you're talking about the safety of pharmaceutical drugs? How is this not something that's an enormous story?
Well, this raises another question. Something
Because it is an enormous story.
By and large, I thought Eric did a fantastic job of describing this. We're at the tail end of this podcast, and we're both tired, and I feel like I've done a much worse job than he did describing the science. But I want
No.
to correct one thing, and I think it was
That's the opposite of what's going on.
you asked Eric.
Eric is
why
fucking
not pursue this,
insane. He always takes a
and
detour.
indicated that was some part of it. It's no part of it, and I think Eric has actually forgotten what happened. So I was dogged about this for a decade. I tried everything I could think of. I talked to every journalist who would listen. As I said, I went to the Committee on Drug Safety, the Commission. I did everything I could think of. I wrote, and Carol Greider, who refused to acknowledge my contribution, got her Nobel Prize. I wrote what I think was a generous op-ed in the New York Times saying that her Nobel Prize was deserved, but that we had this serious problem related to my telomeres, and maybe now this Nobel Prize would give us the courage to look at it. They wouldn't publish it. So I tried everything I could do. And at one point, a good friend of ours, a guy named Mike Brown, he was the former CFO of Microsoft, a really good guy, 21 at Microsoft on the ground floor, and he used to hold something called Science Camp. The Science Camp involved gathering a bunch of really high-quality people to talk privately where nobody was aware that we were even gathered, right? It really gave us the room to be frank. And I was there, and I gave a talk on telomeres. I gave a talk about the science, and I talked about the politics that I run into, and, they were blown away. It was jaw-dropping stuff. And afterwards, Eric and Mike went inside, and they said, we understand why this is having the effect on you that it's having, but you're wrapped around the axle. That was their phrase. You're wrapped around the axle about the story. It's preventing you from doing what you need to do. And I didn't like hearing that. And initially I thought, no, that's not right. And then I think they were right. And so I let it go. And I only talked about it with my students from that point forward. I tried to teach the science as clearly as I could and try to keep the politics as far away from it as I could. And it's very hard to do. But I let it go. Now at that point, I was a obscure college. I had 400 Twitter followers. I wasn't in a position to push the case if somebody didn't want to hear it. Eric is right that we are in a different era. I have 300,000 Twitter followers, 130,000 YouTube subscribers. I got powerful friends. It is possible that is enough to get this raised to the level that need to be raised in order to get it addressed. But I'm not convinced of that. My experience trying to get the topic addressed anywhere for more than a decade was that it was like having a big hammer and there's a bell and you keep running at the bell and slamming.
Okay. I don't need to hear any more of this.
There's nothing.
And I'm done with this.
Higher profile.
I'm too tired to even
Get that bell to ring. But
get it right.
probably
And I've already done an S rank. Oh ooh! That's lucky.
Off guard, he forced me to tell the story, which I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. So anyway, the raw version.
Okay.
It's possible that we are now going to get the bell to ring, but episode 19.
So I got the S rank on the police precinct,
outside of mainstream science
and now we're trying to get it on the cargo
did not
ship.
cause anybody to sit up and take notice inside.
Oh.
And that is the thing I think we still.
Okay, let's look at this Discord post quickly. Our stand against stand on racial equality against racial equality. What am I reading? All of us at Discord were worried by George Floyd's murder, talked about in this podcast. We are horrified by the murder of Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, Ahmaud Arbery, of countless other black people, which is, like I said, even if some of those cases are debunked, those names are still gonna come in a sequence, and even if they're not gonna come in a sequence, the sequence is gonna exist in the head of whoever is saying that there's systemic oppression, systemic abuse. How about systemic abuse of power? Is that better? Is that better? Systemic abuse of power? Anyway. Racism not only something you consciously do. What about unconscious racism? It's not just vicious comment or violent acts. It's insidious. Racism is baked into our institutions and our way of life. Oh, okay, all right. Racism is not only something you consciously do. It's just, okay, we know this, unconscious bias, right? We don't create change where we can. We are complicit in perpetuating white supremacy and oppression of black. Wait, if we don't create change where we can, we are complicit. So white silence is violence. Okay, that's a whole bag of worms. We have a responsibility to ensure that Discord is not used for hate, violence, or harm, except when it's against people you don't like, right? When it's leftist pitchfork time, Discord is the perfect place to organize. You have Vosh's list is now Vosh's Discord. Honored patron 60, tier 432, tier 260 people, and then wait a minute. Tier 1 is 300 people, so it's 400. And then the randos 4,300. So he has a community of about 5,000 people who are the kind of people who draw out pitchforks, who are the kind of people who do ops, rainbow ops, who are the kind of people who impersonate other people, who do Juicy Smollets of the... And we know this because Vosh's people have done this. They have posted his docs into videos of people they don't like, and they're fine. But maybe you just need to become a terrorist, like an internet terrorist. But Discord has a responsibility to ensure it's not used for hate and violence or harm. Blah, blah, blah. We create a company task force. A company task force? Okay. How we combat hate on Discord, how we can use our reach to scale to promote justice. Yeah, no. You mean social justice. You don't mean justice. How we can act as an employer to train and hire. This is fine. Like, do you want to do that? Fine. Hire, well... Except this one. Train, retrain underrepresented people, that's fine. This task force has already identified, and started to implement across these areas. Combating hate on Discord. Blah, 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 blah. 2019. Bad actors. Teams and technology to proactively identify and ban bad actors from the platform. So now I have to be honest on Discord? I can't be a bad actor? I can't pretend to be something? You can't pretend. You can't be a bad actor. You can't pretend a thing. You can't be a troll. You can't joke. You can't make a false identity. Are they gonna verify people on Discord? How are they fucking preventing bad actors? And what about leftist bad actors? What about Destiny and Vosh and fucking Zenderhall, or the plenty furry discords, porn discords? How about those? You don't care about those, right? Move private team. Today we commit 2 additional actions to make sure we are effective as we can be against hate on Discord. We will undertake third-party audit by an organization active in researching the spreading of hate and racism, to observe how Discord works, how we enforce our policies, and to make recommendations for. As long as you're not looking for any specific Discords, then fuck off. Be my guest. Use third party. It's your shit. Obviously. We are investigating significant engineering resources internally to develop software to find and manage abuse proactively. Discord pre-crime unit. We commit to an open source strategy which... This is gonna go great. Oh, software to manage abuse proactively, but it's gonna be open source, which means other companies can benefit, but also you can have people with views you don't like. This is gonna be the fucking GNU and Linux thing all over again. Open source? No, it's not. It's not technically open because you have to sign this declaration of ideology to work in this open source. So it's not open. Fuck off. Using our region scale to promote justice. Starting next week, we will begin our in-product screens and our blog to raise awareness. Okay. Nobody's using that anyway. That's fine. Twitter. That's actually better than Twitter. You can have that in the open. We know what your agenda is. This is fine. This is fine. You can do that. Over time, we'll be reaching out to community organizers, civil society groups, advocates, and activists who are on Discord to offer them support and develop resources specifically for them, including dedicated customer support. You are allowed to discriminate. This is discrimination. This is telling the difference and acting differently towards one group rather than the other. You are entitled to do that. This is consistent with the description of discrimination that I gave from the etymology dictionary, but this is discrimination. You're gonna target people based on ideology to help them. Okay. Acting to train, hire, retrain underrepresented people. Okay. Tonka's Discord is gonna get help. Is Tonka's Discord gonna get help? We want the Discord team to reflect the diversity of society. By percentage, perhaps. And what about society? What society actually? Your platform is used outside of the US. So what actual society? Are you gonna represent your platform? Or are you gonna represent the American? If you represent the American society on a platform that's used all around the world, but also not exactly all around the world, you're gonna skew the results, the racial results. You have to have the racial fucking parity. And what if most people using Discord are white? But now there has to be one black moderator in every private Discord, because that represents the society. So France, okay, maybe. Spain, a little bit less. Well, how about Hungary? How about Romania? Do they have to find their black people and make them moderators as well? What the fuck are you saying? Recruiting a full-time head of diversity and inclusion. Most companies do that anyway. We're not going to get rid of it by complaining about the Discord one. We have to get rid of all of them. An internship program is there? Have there been a story inside Discord? Have there been a leak? Something happened that they're moving in so drastically? Because this looks like a bunch of real stuff mixed in with a bunch of heavy PR stuff that you would only do when you're caught on something. I don't know. An internship program starting 2021 geared to underrepresented groups with 5-year goal of training next generation of Discord leaders. Who the fuck are Discord leaders? And where are the current Discord leaders? Can I talk to them? Can I hold them accountable to what is happening on the fucking communist Discords? No? Okay. This is nothing. We also to Equal Justice Initiative, NAACP, National Bail Fund Network, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor family. That's okay. That's fine. You want to do that? That's fine. I support that decision. I would say you want to donate money. This is more than most leftists do. Usually leftists don't donate money. Here's a reason we plan to share more in the near future. Talking about race. Smithsonian. Okay. But not about white race. You can't talk about white race. Can't talk about the Asian race. Can't talk about race really. But you have to talk about black race. Ah. NPR code switch. What's this? No. Get lost. Robin DiAngelo discusses white fragility. And this is the problem. This is the problem. This woman has done the worst job in the world of for racial peace, if you could call it that. She made a hypothesis that was faulty, tested it. The tests were kind of shitty, but doesn't matter anyway. She wrote the book anyway. So this her hypothesis about white fragility is not supported by anything, but it's still touted as gospel. And we have to fucking listen to her, and we have to model our companies after this. I wish you do this. Move your companies to CHAZ, and you can have all your diversity council, all your white fragility courses, all you want. You can have all the money those companies produce. I'm fine with that. Call it a reparation. Our efforts to combat racism will require time, resources, and sustained attention. So when we start the Discord journey, we're committed to being in it for the long haul. We will keep you updated on our progress every quarter. I will listen to those updates because I am using Discord and I am paying for the service. You pieces of shit. Our users will hold us accountable. No, they won't. Only a part of your users will hold you accountable. CEO of Discord. Follow this guy. Where is he? I'm gonna follow him on Twitter. Okay, I guess this is it. Let's see if I can host someone on where? Nuance Bro is on. Nuance Bro and Hampshire are on Twitch and on DLive. I can't host because I'm not a partner, so I'm gonna host on let's see, Nuance Bro. Where's my boy?
Fake news is if you see something, say something. Only you can prevent fake news dumpster fires. So, it's like, boomer comedy. It was cute. It was funny. The babies, like, showing like a cute, uplifting thing while still making fun of CNN, right? No harm, no foul. It's funny. Nobody actually thinks that's a freaking CNN clip. Like, everyone understands, oh, this is a joke. Like, Trump likes to call them fake news. Like, it's a meme. It's satire, right? But let's go back and see. And then, you know what? We can take a look at the other one Trump did after this. But let's go and see what Jim Acosta is going to say about this. Because this is what he's referencing. So we'll actually go back a little bit, maybe, and then we'll continue.
About 2 toddlers.
In compliance with CDC guidelines, which are recommended but not required.